Chapter 2359. Meg coughed softly, and calmly said, "There are only about 400. It's a little too many people, so I had to trouble Principal Luna and the rest to help me screen out some of them. After today, I still have to eliminate some more students. It's also a kind of trouble to have too many choices." Barbara stared at Meg for a while. She was about to curse, but she suppressed it with her princess upbringing. Shirley also looked at Meg with a complicated expression. Although she didn't say anything, she seemed to have cursed a lot. "Impressive. I didn't expect so many children to want to be chefs," Yabamiya said in surprise. "These children are quite smart. They don't have to worry about filling their stomachs when they're in the kitchen," Camilla said with a smile. "These children have to get rid of this feeling of insecurity. Only then can they really settle down to learn and choose their future," Irina said with some worry. Meg was slightly taken aback when he heard that. Irina's words enlightened him. Although these children had chosen him, how many of them really wanted to be chefs? Or did they just want to get rid of their hunger? Meg's original intention of investing in Hope School was to give these children a chance to choose their future. "I'm full. I have to go. The flying mount I booked is about to depart." Angela put down her bowl, stood up, and said to everyone, "Then, goodbye, sisters." "You and I are not sisters," Meg emphasized. "It's okay. I don't mind," Angela said with a smile. "I mind," Meg said solemnly. Angela waved her hand and went out. "Boss, the restaurant hasn't released any new products recently. The customers are asking me about new products." Yabamiya looked at Meg and asked, "Have you been too busy recently?" Meg was taken aback when he heard that. He had been busy with his side business recently and had indeed neglected his main business. He said with a smile, "Actually, I prepared a few new products. It's just that I've been too busy recently and haven't had the time to release them." The hot dry noodles hadn't been served yet, and the mousse cake series hadn't been launched yet. The hot dry noodles could be launched in the next 2 days, but Meg was still considering the mousse cake. This thing was a little different from ice cream. It made Meg feel a little strange to put it on the menu of the restaurant. "I will release a new dish of noodles in the next 2 days, Meg said to Mia. "Okay." Mia nodded. "Mia, this is the timetable. As my assistant, come with me to Hope Academy for classes after the opening hours." Meg handed a timetable to Mia. Okay." Mia took the timetable, looked at it carefully, and then put it away carefully. "I want to go to class too." Xiaoguai swallowed the bun in his mouth, looked at Meg, and begged, "Father, I want to go to class too. Xiaoguai also wants to go to class with Sister Amy and Sister Anna. Xiaoguai is still young. You can go to school when you grow up a little," Meg said with a smile. "No, Xiaoguai wants to go to class. Xiaoguai also wants to learn." Xiaoguai shook his head. "Mama said that knowledge is a very important thing. It's even more important than food." Meg looked at this little bean helplessly. This little guy was really too young. He was only about 2 years old. He was still wobbling when he walked. If he wanted to go to school at this age, wouldn't he be making things difficult for the teachers? "Xiaoguai, be good. Mama will send you to school when you are 1 year older," Gina said gently as she patted Xiaoguai's head dotingly. Xiaoguai pouted, and his delicate and cute eyebrows squeezed together. He sniffed and looked at Gina with a wronged expression. "Mama, is Xiaoguai very stupid? Is that why father doesn't let Xiaoguai go to class?" "Meg?" He was very innocent. He simply felt that Xiaoguai was still young and not suitable to go to school. "How can that be? Xiaoguai is the smartest. Shall I take you to learn magic? It's just next door. I'll ask my master to teach you magic." Amy slid down the chair and ran to Xiaoguai. She snapped her fingers, and a ball of icy blue flame appeared on her fingertip. "Just like this." "Wow!" Xiaoguai stopped messing around immediately. His eyes were full of light. Then she followed Amy's example and snapped her fingers. Boom! A crack ran through the ceiling, and the entire restaurant shook violently. The restaurant fell silent instantly. Everyone looked at Xiaoguai in shock. On the other hand, Meg's eyelids were twitching wildly. "System, your broken house isn't very sturdy," Meg complained in his mind. "Host, the restaurant's defense level is level 10, and the attack just now has already exceeded level 10, so it's very reasonable for such a situation to occur," the system explained seriously. Meg was silent. What the fuck, there really wasn't anything wrong with it. If it weren't for Xiaoguai's cute and obedient appearance, he would have thought that Thanos had snapped his fingers. "It seems like the restaurant should be renovated. I didn't think about it thoroughly when I renovated it. I didn't tear down the original broken house. Looks like it's still not very good." Meg smiled and tried to smooth things over. Everyone was enlightened when they heard that. It made sense. Xiaoguai was so small. How could he make a crack in the house with just a flick of his finger? What if there isn't? Xiao Guai looked at his finger in confusion. Then, he wanted to snap it again. It's not like that. Gina quickly reached out to stop Xiao Guai from snapping his finger a second time. She held Xiao Guai's hand gently with one hand, and gently said, Xiao Guai, raise your hand slowly. Look at your palm, and then imagine the shape of water. Whoosh! A huge wave appeared in the restaurant out of thin air and rushed toward the dining table. Stop. Barbara raised her finger. The huge wave stopped and didn't pour down directly. Looking at the huge wave surging above their heads, everyone's expression was no longer calm. Is the Enlightenment education now so dangerous? Yabamiya swallowed his saliva. What kind of terrifying talent is this? Is this the legendary latecomer? Camilla was also dumbfounded. This level of magic was close to a level 7 mage's strength. Gina was only teaching Xiao Guai to try to feel the existence of water elements. Fun. Xiao Guai looked up at the huge wave above her head and clapped his little hands excitedly. Gina quickly waved her hand to stop the huge wave. She said embarrassedly, Did I scare everyone? Yes, I did. Barbara nodded. She looked at Xiao Guai and seriously said, I can't believe I felt pressure from a little girl. I was scared too. I feel so useless. Phyllis nodded. She realized that she couldn't withstand the huge wave just now. This is what a genius is, Irina said with a smile. Chapter 2360. Everyone was shocked by the terrifying talent that little Guai had unintentionally revealed. Meg knew that little Guai was the reincarnation of the sea god, after all. Her natural strength was not outrageous, but she was still unable to control the energy in her body stably. However, this was a serious matter. Although he trusted Crassus and Julian very much, he still did not want little Guai's identity to be exposed too quickly. So little Guai is good at water magic. Then it's naturally best for her to learn magic from Gina, Meg said with a smile. Okay. Then little Guai will learn magic from Mother, Gina quickly said. Yes. Little Guai likes magic. Little Guai nodded and threw the matter of school to the back of her mind. Meg asked Irina to help repair the crack on the ceiling with magic. The restaurant suffered from little Guai's finger snap earlier, but it did not startle the customers who were queuing outside. The restaurant opened as usual. After the morning service, Meg brought a set of kitchen utensils and rode his bicycle to Hope School with Yabamiya. Barbara and Shirley's class was scheduled for Tuesday, so they did not have to go to class today. Mr. Mac, you're here for class too? Meg bumped into Vivian, who had just alighted from the carriage when he arrived at the school gate. Yes, Miss Vivian. Meg nodded with a smile. Here, please call me Miss Meg. Vivian looked at Meg, who was wearing a chef's uniform, and nodded with a smile. Okay, Miss Meg. Then her gaze landed on Yabamiya, and her eyes lit up. Mia, this outfit really suits you. Thank you. Yabamiya's face lit up with joy. She was wearing a black office lady's outfit. She was very capable, but also had a hint of sexiness. She looked just like a little secretary. Mia is my teaching assistant, Meg introduced. You're the only one in our school who has a teaching assistant? Vivian winked at Meg. Meg was slightly surprised and asked, Don't those old professors have any? No. Vivian shook her head. Not even Chaos School. This, Meg muttered. He felt that this school was a little different from what he had imagined. If no one else had one but he did, it would be a little too conspicuous. It's okay. I've already reported it to the principal. She allowed it, Meg said matter-of-factly. It wasn't that he wanted to show off, but as a new teacher, he was worried that he wouldn't be able to control the situation if he were to teach 100 students at once. Thus, he got Mia to assist him. Moreover, she could also help with many chores. Vivian looked at Meg with some envy and said, Luna really spoils you. I'll also ask her to apply and see if she can find a teaching assistant to help me grade my homework. We're in a hurry. We'll go in first. Meg glanced at his watch. After passing the teacher's door plate to the guard at the side for verification, he walked in with Mia. I heard that more than 400 students have signed up for your class. It's the most popular course this year, Vivian exclaimed as she caught up with them quickly. This shows that the children's eyes are sharp. Meg smiled. Keep showing off. I feel like I'm going to break down when I'm teaching 40 to 50 children. These 100 brats are squeezing into the kitchen. Vivian looked at Meg sympathetically. Good luck. Meg stopped in his tracks. He felt an inexplicable pressure as he looked at Vivian's back view walking towards the teaching building. More than 100 children, a big kitchen. Meg thought about the scene seriously, and his expression became unnatural. I've miscalculated. I shouldn't have taken in so many students at the beginning. Boss, I think you should have brought Sister Gina. She's the best at handling such situations, Mia said with a smile. Meg was silent. Gina was indeed the nemesis of brats, but she had to stay at home to take care of the children. It's okay. We can handle it too. It's just a bunch of kids. Meg smiled as he cheered Mia on. They walked towards the building of the Chef Practical Training Center. From afar, Meg saw hundreds of children lining up in front of the building. There were also a few teachers and kitchen aunties helping to measure their height. There was a row of pots in front of the height measuring project. The pots were half filled with water. The children went forward one by one and tried their best to lift the pots. Cosmo, you're not tall enough. Work harder next time. Garfield, you're not strong enough. Eat more and train more. Isaac, you're tall and strong enough. Pass. Following the announcement, the children who were eliminated walked to the side dejectedly and were brought back to the classroom by the teachers. Meanwhile, the children who were accepted were led to the empty space in front of the building excitedly. Meg glanced around. There were only about 30 children who passed. At this moment, there were less than 100 children who were still measuring their height. Did I set the bar too high? Meg frowned. The situation was different from what she had imagined. They're too skinny. They look much smaller than children of the same age. Yabamiya looked at the children with pity. She had gone through a similar period in the past. There was no food and she was always hungry. Teacher Meg. A teacher walked over quickly from the crowd. You're here. Teacher Hilla. Meg nodded with a smile. She looked at the children and said, Is this a screening? Yes. The principal said you were busy and asked us to screen the children according to your requirements. Hilla nodded. She looked at the children and said regretfully, But most of these children are not well developed. Not many of them meet the requirements for height and strength. Are the rest of the children here? Meg asked. Yes. We have been screening for an hour. There are more than 400 students. Those who did not meet the requirements have returned to the classroom or went to the next teacher's practical training class. Hilla nodded. Meg glanced at the remaining children. There were only about 10 of them who met his requirements. Most of them had thin arms and legs. They did not look like they could carry a heavy walk. Thank you for your hard work. Meg nodded slightly. It seemed like he could only recruit 30 to 40 students today. However, Meg felt that this threshold was reasonable. He would let the children who did not meet the requirements grow. There was no need to rush. If their height did not meet the requirements, it would be difficult to complete the class in front of the standardized stove. It was the same if their strength did not meet the requirements. Being a chef was a physically demanding job. Meg and Mia stood aside and did not interfere with the screening process. Similar to Meg's estimation, the remaining children met the requirements for height and strength. Only 8 of them met the requirements. The number of children who made it to the shortlist was 38. The elimination rate was more than 90%. Meg was surprised. Wait, teacher. Can you give me a chance? I really can carry that walk. I want to be a chef. At this moment, a young voice begged. Chapter 2361. Meg looked toward the source of the voice. It was a little boy who was only about 1.2 meters tall. He looked skinny and weak. Even though he was wearing a brand new school uniform, one could still feel that the loose uniform covered his skinny frame. However, his eyes were red at that moment, and he was looking at the testing teacher with anticipation. Beck, your height doesn't meet the requirements. According to the rules, you can't participate in this class. Come again next year when you're taller. Hilla went forward and patted the little boy's shoulder to comfort him. But I really want to learn how to cook from Mr. Meg. He's my idol. I want to be a chef as good as him. The little boy named Beck said dejectedly. He lowered his head and could not help but sob. I can really lift that walk. Hilla sighed and looked at Meg, who was standing at the side. I can give you a chance. If you can lift that walk with one hand, you'll be accepted. Meg walked over and said to Beck. Beck raised his head and looked at Meg, who was wearing a black and white chef's uniform. His eyes lit up, and he said in surprise, You're the head chef, Mr. Meg. You can call me Teacher Meg here. Meg smiled. I've given you a chance. It's up to you whether you can grasp it or not. I'll definitely succeed. Beck nodded solemnly and walked toward the iron wok that was filled with water. The iron wok and the half wok of water weighed more than 5 kilograms. Lifting a 5-kilogram iron wok with one hand and lifting something that weighed 5 kilograms were two completely different things. Being able to control one's own wok was the most basic requirement for a chef. That was also the reason why Meg set up this test. If you couldn't even handle your own wok, how could you become a chef? Everyone looked at Beck and cheered him on. Beck, do your best. Hilla even encouraged him. Beck walked to the iron wok on the ground. He took a deep breath and reached out his skinny hand to grab the handle of the wok. "Get up!" Beck shouted and tried to lift the pot up. His face was red from holding it in. However, the pot shook and only left the ground for less than 10 centimeters before it fell back to the ground. Alas! Everyone sighed. They had thought that this child who was chasing his dreams would create a miracle, but now it seemed that the miracle did not happen. Only Meg was still looking at Beck, and his eyes were filled with admiration. Because this child didn't give up. He wasn't even depressed. He rolled up the sleeves of his school uniform, revealing a pair of skinny hands. He steadied his horse stance, and his small hands grabbed the handle of the pot from below, allowing the top of the pot to rest on his forearm. Taking a deep breath, he gritted his teeth and lifted. Veins popped out on his skinny arms, and Beck's red face looked a little ferocious. However, that iron pot, which was not light even for an adult, was actually lifted up. And this time, it wasn't a flash in the pan, but a steady rise. Sweat began to appear on Beck's forehead, and his arms and legs were trembling. The iron pot shook, and the water inside swayed from side to side. The scene was silent again. Everyone watched the scene, and even held their breaths. Beck clenched his teeth and stared at the iron pot in front of him. The iron pot shook, and water splashed out, but it was still rising slowly. Finally, Beck stood up straight and lifted the iron pot above his chest. "Success!" Hilla shouted in surprise. The surrounding students and teachers cheered as well. A smile appeared on Beck's pale face. As soon as he relaxed, he couldn't hold the iron pot anymore. The iron pot slipped, and his body swayed and fell backward. "Beck!" Hilla shouted in surprise. At this moment, a hand grabbed the falling iron pot and supported Beck's falling body from behind. The heavy iron pot was firmly held, and not a single drop of water splashed out. On the other hand, Beck was supported by Meg, so he didn't fall to the ground. "Teacher Meg, I did it." Beck was slightly stunned, and then he looked at Meg and said excitedly, "Yes, you did it." Meg smiled and helped him up, and looked at him approvingly. "You've been accepted. You're the first student in the first batch of the advanced class for the God of Cookery." "Really? That's great. Thank you." Beck was so excited that he danced with joy. Hilla saw that Beck was fine and heaved a sigh of relief. When she heard Meg's words, she also smiled. She originally thought that Meg's conditions were too harsh and heartless, but at this moment, she saw a glimmer of light in Meg. Wasn't it more moving to let a child fight for an opportunity than being humane? Meg looked at the bruise on Beck's arm that was pressed down by the iron pot handle, and his heart was moved. He was very satisfied with this child's temperament. A person who could be ruthless to himself would become someone very easily as long as he was given a chance. "Thank you, teachers and aunties, for your help. Let us complete the rest of the interviews." "Thank you for your hard work," Meg said to Hilla and the rest. "This is the name list of the children who passed the screening. Teacher Meg, if you need anything, feel free to look for me anytime." Hilla passed a name list to Meg, and then left with the other teachers and aunties. Meg looked at the name list of 39 people in his hand. This was not the final name list. He had to conduct a simple interview with them to test their temperament and see if they could become chefs. He wanted to nurture chefs who could be independent in the future, and not nurture an extracurricular interest for the children. They might have chosen him for various reasons, but the only requirement he had for these children was that they were really determined to become chefs. Is this the practical training teacher? His clothes look so cool. I heard that teacher is the best chef on the Norland continent. He is also the most expensive chef. It would be great if I could eat his dishes. Then, if we learn to cook from him, will we become good chefs too? It should be no problem if we can eat our fill. The students standing at the side discussed softly with anticipation written all over their faces. Meg heard their words, and the corners of his mouth curled up. He kept the name list, and walked to the children with a smile. "Hello, students. I am your chef practical training teacher, Meg. Thank you for trusting and choosing my course. Next, I will bring you to the Practical Training Center for a tour. After that, we will conduct the final interview. Those who pass the interview will be the students of the first batch of advanced class for the God of Cookery." "Yes," the children answered in unison. "Come in." Meg took out the key to open the door of the Practical Training Center. Currently, only he and Luna had the key to the door of the Practical Training Center in Hope School. "Wow!" The students behind Meg exclaimed in unison when they saw the spectacular Practical Training Center on the first floor. End of chapter. Chapter 2362. In the spacious training center, 100 sets of metal pots and stoves were lined up neatly, creating a spectacular sight to behold. The children present had never seen anything like this before, and all of them gaped in shock, as if they were Granny Lou in the Grand View Garden. This is where we'll learn how to cook in the future. This is the most scientific distribution of stoves. You'll be able to cook most of the food here, Meg introduced to the children. Teacher, can everyone have their own stoves? Beck asked in a low voice. Yes, everyone will have their own stoves. During class, you have the right to use all of the cooking utensils and condiments on the stoves. Meg nodded with a smile. That's awesome. Beck's eyes lit up. The other children were also excited. These cooking utensils and stoves looked so cool. It was completely different from the greasy kitchen that they had imagined. Meg looked at those young faces with a serious expression, and said, being a chef is a tough job, but the rewards are good. I hope that the students I recruit are all people who are determined to become outstanding chefs, and I will do my best to teach all of you how to become outstanding chefs. The children looked at him, and their expressions became much more serious. Perhaps you don't know what kind of profession a chef is. Before the interview, I'd like to give you a brief introduction. Meg walked toward the nearest stove and waved at the children who were still standing at the door. Gather around? The children all gathered around and looked at Meg with curiosity. A chef is a person whose profession is cooking. Their job is to cook and prepare dishes for their customers. The stove is your stage. You'll be here to cut ingredients, cook, and complete the day's work. Meg picked up an iron pot and looked at the children. This iron pot is twice as heavy as the one you were holding before. If you become a chef, you may have to toss this pot thousands of times in a day. Furthermore, it's not an empty pot, but a full pot of ingredients. The children's expressions changed slightly upon hearing this, and some of them even showed signs of retreating. This was different from what they had imagined. After entering this beautiful building, they would be able to eat and drink well. Just now, when they were at the entrance, they already felt that it was very strenuous to carry the big iron pot, but now, Teacher Meg actually said that here, they needed to carry a big iron pot that was twice as heavy as the previous one, fill it with all kinds of ingredients, and toss the pot several thousand times. Beck was also a little worried, but when he saw the bruises on his arm that had yet to fade, his gaze quickly became resolute. It wasn't easy for him to get in here, so what was there to be afraid of if it was a bit tiring? With a serious expression, Meg looked at the children and said, to be a chef, you must have 4 essentials, namely, being full, being hungry, being hot, and being cold. This is a job that requires both mental and physical strength. If you don't have a healthy physique, strong willpower, and confidence to persevere, then you should quit now. The children were silent for a while. Then, 3 of them stood out. Teacher, I feel like I don't have enough strength. I want to quit, said a boy who was rather tall among the children. Us too, the other 2 children also whispered, lowering their heads in embarrassment. No problem. You can cross your names off this list, and then go back to the classroom to choose a more suitable course for you. Meg nodded and put the list on the stove. The 3 children stepped forward and crossed off their names. After saying goodbye to Meg, they quickly left. Is there anyone else who wants to quit? Meg looked at the children and said rather sternly, I'll tell you in advance that I'm a very strict teacher. If you choose to stay, then you must complete all the learning tasks I assign. There will be an assessment at the end of every month. Students who fail the assessment will be eliminated. The hall was silent for a while. Then, another 4 children stepped forward and crossed off their names, voluntarily quitting. Very good. Meg looked at the remaining 32 children, and a smile finally appeared on his serious face. Welcome to the God of Cookery Advanced class. I hope that you can all become independent chefs in the future. The children were stunned, as if they hadn't recovered from Meg's words. Teacher, have we all passed? A child asked. Yes, you have passed my test. You have the basic qualities and beliefs to become a chef. Meg smiled and nodded. Of course, this doesn't mean that you can really become a chef, but you have received an admission ticket. The children had already begun to cheer, and the original tension had dissipated. Looking at the energetic smiling faces, Meg and Mia's faces also revealed smiles. Okay, let's first choose our seats according to the principle of voluntariness. Each stove corresponds to a number. After you choose your favorite seat, it will be fixed in the future. This number also represents your student ID, Meg said. After choosing your seat, we will introduce ourselves, Meg arranged. The children dispersed and began to look for their favorite seats. Soon, the children found their favorite seats. Most of them were near the front row, and the row closest to the podium was completely occupied. Meg was very pleased with the children's enthusiasm for learning. He raised his hand to signal the children to be quiet, and then said, Students, let me first introduce myself. I am Meg, your chef training teacher, and also the head chef of Mamie's. In the next semester, I will conduct systematic chef training for you. I will do my best to make you a qualified chef. Baker took the lead in applauding, and the children followed suit. Mamie's was very famous. Even the children had heard of that expensive restaurant. Alright, then let's begin with the students sitting at table 1. Before we begin our lesson, I'd like to get to know all of you, Mag said with a smile as he turned to look at Becker, who was sitting at table 1. Baker stood up, smiled a little shyly, and said, I am Baker, 11 years old this year. My mother said that my father used to be a very good chef, but I have never seen him. I also want to be a chef, a very good chef, and then cook delicious dishes for my mother. Meg nodded slightly. So it was this kind of belief that supported him to raise that walk. This child is very sensible. Mia looked at Baker with pity. End of chapter. Chapter 2363. Anyone could be great if they had a dream. Beck's self-introduction was applauded and encouraged by his classmates, and the other children also began to introduce themselves. These children had all grown up in a tough environment, and had a tenacious character that was rarely seen in their peers. This made Meg very satisfied. Learning to cook was a very arduous journey. To these half-grown children, whether they could persevere or not was the biggest obstacle in their future. But now, it seemed that these children more or less had their own beliefs and perseverance. Although there was no guarantee that they could persevere, at least they were more hardworking than the average child. And among them, a little girl named Farah left a deep impression on him. She was sitting in the corner, seat number 45. Her short brown hair was a little yellow due to malnutrition, but she was half a head taller than the boys her age. She had deep and delicate facial features, and a pair of gray cat ears were faintly discernible under her short hair. Yes, she was a half-orc. She was half-human and half-orc. Even in Chaos City, the situation of mixed-race people was not good. This had been proven by Amy and Yabamiya. Meg looked at her slightly stooped body, and couldn't hide the inferiority in her timid eyes. Her self-introduction was very simple. Her name was Farah, and she wanted to be a chef because she wanted to live. Mag smiled, and said, All right, I've remembered all of your names. I hope that at the end of this semester, I'll still be able to see all of you sitting in your seats and completing your first term studies. The children looked at him, and their pure eyes seemed to sparkle like stars. There were 32 children, and only 3 of them were girls. The rest were all boys. Among them, there were humans, demons, and orcs. Among them, humans were the most numerous. And at this moment, Meg suddenly realized something. His selection criteria seemed to have directly excluded dwarves and goblins from the list. Seems like I'll have to change the rules for the next term, Meg thought to himself. He couldn't be labeled as being discriminated against. After the self-introductions, everyone had a basic understanding of each other. Meg didn't say much, and went straight to the lesson. Now, let me introduce our workstations, which are the stoves in front of you. The stoves are divided into several areas. In the first lesson, Meg didn't rush to teach the children how to cook. Instead, he gave them a detailed and interesting introduction about the kitchen and some basic knowledge of being a chef. Before learning how to be a chef, it was important to understand their workplace and job scope, as well as some basic manners. Meg looked at the students seriously, and said, Students, remember that the kitchen is a chef's face. If you can't even keep your face as clean and can't withstand the guest's inspection, then you don't deserve to be a chef. The students nodded solemnly. They felt that they had learned a lot of useful knowledge today. Meg raised his hand and looked at his watch. It was almost 11 o'clock. Okay, then today's lesson is over. It was a pleasure to meet all of you. Meg looked at the children with a smile. The children stood up reluctantly and were about to say goodbye to their teacher. It's almost lunchtime. Today's first lesson didn't teach you how to cook, but I've decided to make lunch for everyone. Eat before class ends, Meg continued. Yay! The children cheered. They had just listened to Meg talk a lot, and they were hungry. They didn't expect their teacher to make lunch for them. Mia walked over with a big box of ingredients. Meg opened the box and took out various ingredients. Today, I'm going to make the signature dish of our restaurant for lunch. It's also the first dish of our restaurant, Yangzhou fried rice. Meg took out the fathead fish. A cold light flashed, illuminating the children's eyes. The ingredients we used are eggs, ham, tree mushrooms, winter bamboo shoots. Meg introduced the ingredients to the children one by one. Now, let's cut it into the size of a grain of rice. He grabbed a winter bamboo shoot and threw it up. Then, he raised the knife and slashed it down. The winter bamboo shoot fell down, turning into the size of a grain of rice, neatly falling into a plate prepared at the side. Have you all learned it? Meg looked at the children, whose mouths were wide open in shock. The children all shook their heads. What did they learn? They didn't even learn how to use their eyes. It doesn't matter. It's good that you can't learn it now. But as long as you learn from me, you will be able to master this skill in the future, Meg said with a smile. The children's eyes lit up, and they were full of anticipation for the next lesson. The fancy cutting made the children exclaim again and again. Seeing Teacher Meg cook had completely subverted their imaginations about cooking. The ingredients were all in his hands, and they could be changed into any shape he wanted. Moreover, the whole process was like a performance. It was so smooth that people couldn't help but exclaim. After finishing the cutting, Meg turned on the 6 stoves at the same time, preparing to make 32 servings of Yangzhou fried rice in one go. Above Meg's stoves, there was a projector for real-time broadcasting. On both sides of the podium were enlarged projection screens, which ensured that the children sitting in the last row could see the content of his lesson clearly. The iron wok was heated up, the lard was added, the spices were added, and the side dishes were added. Meg held the iron ladle in one hand and wandered between the stoves. After a while, the fragrance of the fried rice spread out. It smells so good. Slurp. I think it will be super delicious. I heard that a serving of Yangzhou fried rice costs several hundred copper coins at Mamie's. So expensive. Will we be able to make such expensive and delicious food in the future? The children discussed in low voices, staring at the colorful fried rice on the big screen, and couldn't stop drooling. Da-da-da-da-da. Meg turned off the fire on the stoves one by one, and then put the fried rice on the plate that Mia had already prepared. 1 ladle, 1 bowl. 32 servings of Yangzhou fried rice. The color and amount of each serving were exactly the same. Meg put down the iron ladle, looked at the children with shining eyes, and said with a smile, "Students, according to the order of your student numbers, come up and take your lunch." Baker was the first to stand up. He trotted to the podium, took a plate of Yangzhou fried rice from Mia with a devout expression, and carefully carried it back to his seat. The children went up to the podium according to the order of their student numbers to get their lunch. Oh, so delicious. This is too delicious. I bit my tongue. I've decided. I must become an excellent chef. I will cook for myself every day. For a moment, the children's praises were endless. Chapter 2364. Meg ended today's lesson amidst the praises of the children. Meg saw not only 32 diehard fans in these children, but also the future hope of the Norland continent's culinary world. The students who walked out of the training center with satisfied faces happened to meet the army of Ganfinists who were sprinting towards the cafeteria. The powerful Ganfinists who were sprinting at the front saw the oily corners of their mouths and the satisfied smiles on their faces. They thought of the various rumors about this beautiful training center for the god of cookery, and then looked at the cafeteria that was regarded as a holy place, and felt that its radiance had dimmed a lot. They must have eaten even more delicious food. Envy, jealousy. The children who had just eaten the delicious Yangzhou fried rice were still smiling blissfully. They couldn't help but feel a little proud as they watched the students who were sprinting with all their might just to snatch the most delicious spoonful of food from the cafeteria ante. Meals were provided in class, and such delicious food. This was too awesome. It's actually healed? Shell was the last to walk out of the training center. He looked at his arm in amazement. The arm that was bruised by the wok had actually recovered completely. He didn't care about such a small injury. He used to help people carry goods, and bumps were common. Because he didn't have much flesh on his body, he often left a black mark when he pressed on it. He didn't have to worry about it, and it would be fine in a few days. But he didn't expect the bruise to disappear in the time it took to eat a meal. He felt warm and comfortable all over, as if he had taken a hot bath. It must be that delicious Yangzhou fried rice that helped me recover. It's so miraculous. I must become a chef as good as Teacher Meg. Baker clenched his fists tightly, and made up his mind. Farah ran back to the classroom with a book in her arms. The students had all gone to the cafeteria to eat, and she was the only one in the quiet classroom. She gently placed the book in her arms on the table. It was a picture book. On the cover, there was a castle under the night sky. A young girl wearing a beautiful dress was riding on the wall, as if she was about to escape from the castle. Beside her, there was a black cat. "Miss Black Cat," Farah murmured softly. Farah muttered softly, his eyes sparkling. This was a gift from the teaching assistant. She even smiled and cheered her on. Her smile was warm and cute. She could tell that the young lady was also a half-orc, but she was so optimistic and positive. Her smile was very infectious. She had never seen such an exquisite picture book before. Ever since she was a child, she had never received a gift. It was already very difficult for her mother to bring her up. How could she have the heart to ask for more from her? This was the most expensive gift she had ever received. The exquisite and beautiful cover made her unable to resist opening the picture book. Then, she was mesmerized. Her mother was literate. No matter how busy she was, she would always teach her how to read and write every day. Therefore, she was more literate than the other children who wandered the streets. But she had never seen such a wonderful and interesting story. Miss Black Cat fought against the rules, and in the face of various obstacles and attacks, she still persisted in her beliefs and dreams. The story of her climbing over a high wall and embarking on the path of chasing her dreams made her yearn for it. "Farah, what are you looking at?" A voice came from the side. Farah suddenly woke up. She hurriedly closed the picture book and hid it in the drawer. Only then did she realize that there were already 5 or 6 students in the classroom. The students had finished their lunch and were gradually returning to the classroom. "No. Nothing," Farah shook her head and said to her few friends. She did not want others to see this picture book. She did not know how to explain how she came to possess such a precious and exquisite picture book. Perhaps, she would be treated as a thief. It wasn't as if such a thing had never happened before. But Hope School was different from the outside world. The teachers here were very friendly. She could feel their goodwill. But at this moment, it was as if a window had been opened in her heart, and light shone in. Yes, so what if the whole world did not understand you? As long as you worked hard to pursue your dreams, you could become a confident person, a person who was respected by others. Just like the teaching assistant. She must be very confident, right? Her culinary skills must also be very good. "I want to become a chef who can bring happiness to others like Teacher Meg." Farah thought silently in her heart. But she had already planted a seed in her heart. "Looking at these children reminds me of when I was young. They were really energetic young men and women," Mia said with a smile as she sat on the back seat of the bicycle and wrapped her arm around Meg's waist gently. "Aren't you an energetic young lady now?" "You don't lose to them at all," Meg said with a smile as he turned his head. "Really? I like the word energetic." Mia's smile became even brighter. "Although I didn't do anything today, I still feel that it was a very wonderful experience. So this is what it feels like to be a teacher. I can see the trust and thirst for knowledge in those children's eyes. They are so cute. You have helped me a lot. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been able to handle these little fellows alone. However, these children are indeed not bad. They have been through hardships, and they can endure hard work. They are all good seedlings." Meg nodded. He was also very satisfied with this batch of students. If he went to Chaos School under the same conditions, he might not be able to choose such students. Learning to cook was too tough, and he was not confident that these children would be able to persevere. However, as long as they were willing to persevere and work hard, he would definitely work hard to groom them into qualified chefs. As for whether they could be outstanding in the future, that would depend on their own luck. "Boss, I think you are very suitable to be a teacher. The children love you so much. Their eyes are shining like stars," Mia said. "This is my first time being a teacher. Actually, I am also quite nervous. However, the experience so far is not bad. I can give myself a passing grade," Meg said with a smile. This was not him at Versailles. He had rehearsed the rhythm of today's lesson many times. In order to let these children feel that becoming a chef was a very cool thing, he had put in a lot of effort. Judging from the children's feedback, it was not bad. "I think that child called Farah is quite cute. You asked me to give her the picture book because you want to groom her into an excellent chef?" "I just want her to be more confident. After she passes that hurdle, she will become more powerful. However, whether she can become an excellent chef depends on how hard she works." He stopped the bicycle in front of the restaurant, and looked at Yabamiya, whose ponytail swayed gently, as she jumped off the bicycle. He smiled, and said, "I want to see the same energetic smile on her face as yours." Chapter 2365. Other teachers are afraid that they can't recruit students, but Mr. Meg is really good. More than 400 students signed up, but only 32 of them stayed. Isn't this nonsense? Didn't he say that he would recruit 100 students? Why did he change his mind in the end? Such a big practical training center with only 32 students, isn't it a waste of space? Yes, the other practical training teachers don't have enough space. If Mr. Meg's practical training center is empty, headmaster, can you let him open it to other teachers? Aren't there 3 floors upstairs? Several old teachers gathered in the headmaster's office and discussed with Luna about the teaching space. Their tone was not harsh, but with some helplessness. "Dear teachers, I have contacted the construction team about the practical training space. They are going to build a comprehensive practical training building in the northwest corner of the school. They will use the method of night construction to not affect the children's daily classes. It can be completed in a month at the earliest." Luna looked at the old teachers and smiled. "I know that you all want to let the children have a good teaching space, but the Chef Practical Training Center is funded by Mr. Meg. At the beginning, it was also agreed that this building would be handed over to him for chef teaching. Now how can it be used for other purposes? But, as for the fact that Teacher Mag is only taking in 30 students, he has also told me before that learning to cook is different from learning knowledge. A strong physique and a firm will are the most basic requirements. Among the children in our batch, only these 32 can meet his requirements. Luna looked at the teachers and said sincerely, I hope you can understand that Mr. Meg is choosing students and teaching with a responsible attitude for the students. The students choose the teachers, and the teachers choose the students. This is the right I give to every teacher. The office was quiet for a while. Alas, these children have lived a hard life in the past. How can they have strong bodies? An old teacher sighed. You don't have to worry about that. These children are all still growing. I've only been eating at school for a week, and I can see that the students in the class are already starting to grow taller. In less than 2 months, there will definitely be more children who can meet Teacher Mag's requirements, another teacher said with a smile. Yes, these little fellows are growing really fast. I see that their appetite is much bigger than the students in Chaos School. Speaking of the children's appetite, the old teachers all smiled. Luna's words made sense, so the old teachers did not continue to pester her. After chatting for a while, they all left. Phew! Luna let out a sigh of relief. Even though she was now the principal, facing this group of teachers, she still felt pressured as if she was facing her elders. I heard that we can have free lunch in Mr. Mac's class. Headmaster, why don't you help me ask Mr. Mac if he needs another teaching assistant? Vivian went into the headmaster's office with a smile, and closed the door behind her. You have to ask him yourself. I can't bring myself to ask him, Luna said with an exasperated smile. I just laughed at him this morning. He's the only one in the whole school who has a teaching assistant. I want to be embarrassed too. Vivian shrugged, and suddenly regretted her recklessness this morning. Luna stood in front of the window, and looked at the children playing in the field downstairs. She asked softly, do you think those children can become as good as Mr. Meg? That's impossible. Vivian shook her head with certainty. Mr. Mac is a genius, a 1 in 1,000 years genius. Even if those children can become good chefs in the future, they can't be as good as Mr. Mac. They'll fall short. Luna smiled, but she could not refute Vivian's words. But for those children, this is definitely a great opportunity. Vivian smiled. Even if they're not as good as Mr. Mac, they're still top-notch chefs. Look at Mana Hot Pot Restaurant's booming business. As long as they can learn from Mr. Mac, they'll definitely be great chefs in the future. That's a good thing indeed. Luna nodded. For those children who were struggling with food and clothing, this would be a big way out for them. Apart from imparting knowledge to the children and giving them the opportunity to make choices, Luna also wanted them to learn a skill and completely get rid of their poverty by establishing Hope School. Practical classes were not extra classes in Hope School, but were very important teaching content. But now, only 32 students can meet his requirements, Luna muttered. You don't have to worry about that at all. I just came from the cafeteria. These children are very qualified to eat. They can eat 2 bowls per person and drink a big bowl of soup. They can eat different dishes every day. In a month's time, there will be many children who can meet Mr. Mac's requirements. Vivian waved her hand nonchalantly. All right, it's time to eat. Meg came out of the kitchen with a tray and called out to the girls. As soon as he put down the tray, a little ball hugged his leg and climbed up slowly like a koala bear. He looked up, and his face with some baby fat was filled with confusion. Father, why can Aunt Caroline, Sister Amy, and Sister Ann sleep with you in the cafeteria, but Mother and I can't? The cafeteria quieted down immediately. The girls gave little Guy a motherly smile and sat down happily. They were ready to watch the show. Speaking of which, Gina was also a mother. She lived alone with her child outside. No matter how one looked at it, she looked like a pitiful second wife who was ostracized by the first wife. Although that was not the truth, it did not affect the girls from watching the show at all. Irina also sat down with a smile. She also looked like she was watching the show. Meg's expression was slightly awkward. He did not expect the little girl to realize the difference so quickly. Gina blushed slightly, but little Guy had asked her the same question yesterday. She did not know how to answer. The little girl said she would ask her father every day. She did not expect her to really ask. Little Guy also wants to sleep in the cafeteria and listen to father's stories. Before Meg could say anything, the little girl pouted and acted coquettishly. She looked like she was going to cry if he did not agree. Meg felt like his heart was going to melt. How could the little ball be so cute? He reached out to carry her, and his gaze drifted to Irina, who was sitting beside him. Tracheitis was a chronic disease. Usually, one would not even know when they had contracted it. Little Guy likes to stay in the cafeteria. Then you can stay in the cafeteria with your mother from now on, Irina said dotingly as she reached out to pinch little Guy's cheeks. Chapter 2366. Gina glanced at Irina in shock. She didn't expect her to agree to let Xiao Guai stay in the restaurant with her. It wasn't that she hadn't stayed in the restaurant before, but she stayed in the big fish tank before Irina came back. Now, where should she stay? Then from today onwards, Xiao Guai will stay in the restaurant. Father will tell you stories every night. Meg smiled and lifted Xiao Guai up high when he saw Irina speak first. Then, he kissed her on the cheek. Yay! I like staying in the restaurant. Xiao Guai wrapped her arms around Meg's neck happily and kissed him on the cheek. Xiao Guai, are you going to abandon your favorite big sister Barbara just like that? Barbara looked at Xiao Guai with a little resentment. Xiao Guai turned to look at Babla, and comforted her in a soft voice, Be a good girl, big sister Babla. Come to the restaurant and sleep. I'll get father to tell you a story. If you're scared, I can get him to sleep with you. Then forget it. Barbara quickly shook her head in rejection. She didn't have the guts to ask the boss to sleep with her in front of the lady boss. As a reserved princess, she would never say something like that. I can, Camilla suddenly said lazily. Camilla suddenly said lazily as she crossed her legs and leaned against the back of the chair. She looked at Mag coquettishly, and said, I haven't been sleeping well recently. I can't sleep well at night. If I can listen to boss stories while I sleep, I should be able to sleep well. That's the habit of your species. It has nothing to do with whether you tell stories or not. Meg frowned as he looked at Camilla with some judgment. It seemed like this woman still hadn't given up. She actually wanted to sleep in the restaurant now. Then, he glanced at Irina at the side. However, Irina didn't say anything. She had a slight smile on her lips as if it had nothing to do with her and she only wanted to watch the show. The ladies, on the other hand, looked as if they were watching a show. Gina had no choice but to come to the restaurant to sleep, while Babla was playing around with Xiao Guai. However, Camilla had proposed to sleep in the restaurant and listen to the boss's bedtime story. She had taken the initiative. So, was there something going on between Camilla and the boss? Unlike the others, Camilla never appeared in front of the customers as an employee of Mamie's. She would finish her work before the restaurant opened and leave after eating the employee's meal. If she only wanted to have 3 meals a day, with her status and wealth, it wouldn't be a problem for her to have 3 meals a day at Mamie's. So, what was her reason for staying at Mamie restaurant? Was because she loved cutting vegetables? That didn't seem so. Now, it seemed that she might be lusting after the boss's body. Otherwise, why would she take the initiative to stay in the restaurant when the lady boss was back? There has been thunder in the spring recently. I can't sleep at night. Hearing the thunder makes me even more scared, Camilla said coquettishly as she looked at Meg. She even winked at him. Meg's frown deepened. This woman was very bad. She was a 9th grade powerhouse, and she said she was scared of thunder? This was a female Batman who dared to drink fresh blood. The restaurant doesn't have so many rooms. If you want to listen to bedtime stories, I can record a few stories for you with a photo stone. You can take them back and listen to them before you sleep, Meg said with a smile. When he mentioned the photo stone, he purposely emphasized it. Camilla gritted her teeth in hatred. This fellow, did he really want to use the shadow recording stone to capture her? Humph. She was a little scared in the past, but now, Camilla glanced at Irina. If the lady boss knew that Meg had done those things to her, what would happen? Then I want 2 photo stones. You know what kind they are. Camilla looked at Meg and stretched out 2 fingers with a meaningful smile. Is the hypnosis effect really that good? Can you give me one too? Mia raised her hand. Okay, I'll give it to you later. Meg nodded, pretending that he didn't understand the meaning behind Camilla's words. If the photostone's effect isn't good, then I'll have to sleep on the floor. I don't care about the room at all. Camilla's smile had a hint of slyness. Let's eat, let's eat. Meg changed the topic and glanced at Irina from the corner of his eye. Now, he was a little worried that Camilla would fight to the death. If the photostone's matter was exposed, it would be a loss for both sides. Although Camilla would be the one to lose face, who was the one who took the photo stone? Who was that S? You see, he's the one with the problem. Big sister Camilla, our room is super big. If you sleep on the floor, you can sleep with Ugly Duckling. The carpet is super soft too, Amy said very generously. Camilla glanced at Ugly Duckling, who was squatting on the floor and eating seriously, and said with disdain, I don't want to sleep with Ugly Duckling. Meow? Ugly Duckling turned around and glanced at her with disdain in its eyes. You still dare to look down on me? Camilla was furious. What bad intentions can a kitten have? Little Guai said to Ugly Duckling. Ugly Duckling turned around and meowed at her in a fawning manner. Then let it sleep outside the door, Little Guai continued. Ugly Duckling? What was it talking about? Of course, as a completely tamed mount, it didn't dare to say anything even though it was angry. It could only look at Amy for help. This was its little mistress. It only let Little Guai ride it because of its little mistress. Amy thought for a while and nodded. That's a good idea. Ugly Duckling has been snoring too loudly recently. Ugly Duckling retracted its head and continued to eat the meat in its bowl. Yes, love would really disappear. After the lunch service ended, Meg didn't go out. Instead, he went upstairs to discuss with the system to prepare a new room for Gina. Gina was already used to sleeping on a bed, so she didn't need a glass tub to sleep in. However, Meg still prepared a separate bathroom for her and a very big bathtub. The configuration was similar to their master bedroom, so she didn't have to go to the public bathroom to wash up. The house was big, so it was capricious. There was still a lot of space upstairs in the designated hot pot area that hadn't been used yet. Isn't there still a lot of space here? Why don't you let Camilla stay here too? Irina stood at the door with her arms crossed as she looked at Meg, who was pretending to decorate the room, with a smile. That's not appropriate, Meg replied calmly. What unspeakable secrets do you have between the two of you? Irina walked in and looked straight into Meg's eyes. If there's really something between the two of us, either I die, or she dies early, isn't that right? Meg met Irina's gaze calmly. Chapter 2367. What you said does make some sense? Irina sat on the bed, and said to him, You seem to have found a lot of things for yourself recently. Why? Are you planning to be the richest man in the world after becoming the world's most powerful person? The goal of being the richest man in the world is too vulgar. After knowing that this is the 1,000-layer cake world, the title of the world's most powerful person is even more self-deceiving. Maybe in a few more years, I won't even be able to defeat Little Guai. Meg shook his head with a smile. If Little Guai is a god, why did it choose to reincarnate now after being silent for countless years? Irina looked at Meg, and asked seriously, What about the other gods? Meg was taken aback, and his expression also became serious. There were many legends about gods in this world. Almost every race had one, and there was usually more than one. Little Guai was the sea god worshipped by the Lantistians. It was an illusory existence in Lantist's thousands of years of history, but it suddenly reincarnated and chose Gina to be its guardian. Then, would the gods of the other races reincarnate too? Little Guai, who had yet to awaken, had already displayed its terrifying power that was above the laws. Once those reincarnated gods were awakened, they would definitely break the Norland continent's power limit again. If all the gods reincarnate, it might be even more troublesome than the great old ones. Meg sighed, and suddenly felt a headache coming on. At least the gods aren't in a hurry to destroy the world. Who told you that God is a kind being? Meg looked at Irina. Even the abyss demons have their own gods that they worship. I just don't know if it's the cleansing altar envoy or the wild boar spirit. Irina opened her mouth, and was actually speechless. At least the great old ones are bound by the seal, and once they appear, everyone can work together to seal them. But if the gods reincarnate one after another, and they have a superior status among the races, then the situation might get out of control. Meg frowned, and felt that the problem was a little big. Irina looked at Meg and her expression suddenly changed. You want to slay a god? Meg looked up and met Irina's gaze. After a moment of silence, he shook his head and said, If they are like Xiao Guai and don't have the memories of God after reincarnation, then they are no different from ordinary children. Killing them would be too cruel. Then what do you plan to do? At the moment, I'm not sure if the other gods will reincarnate. Little Guai might be an exception. But if the gods really do reincarnate on a large scale, I think it might be a good idea to gather all of them together and instill some grand and righteous values in them. You plan to put them in a cage? Irina asked in surprise. No, it's a school. Meg grinned. A closed boarding school. What's the difference between that and a cage? Irina rolled her eyes, but she quickly added, But if we really gather them together, it might be a group of extremely terrifying combat power. I adopted a group of gods? Meg rested his chin on his hand. He felt that this was a challenging idea. You'd better not adopt a group of sons and daughters. Moreover, it's the kind that gives away wives. Irina took out a knife from somewhere and spun it on her fingertips. She glanced at Meg's waist. Of course not. Am I that kind of person? A good teacher is not a good father. I know that. Meg quickly waved his hand. After preparing a room for Gina and Xiao Guai, Meg went to the study to write a few letters and sent them to various places. Since he had taken the princesses of various races into the restaurant, he had indirectly established some friendly relations with various races. Therefore, Meg asked them to help him find some gifted children and wanted to take them in as his disciples. The main point of finding these children was that both their parents were dead. Secondly, they had special abilities and could talk nonsense. Needless to say, if both their parents were dead, it would be difficult for them to become a god if they didn't have such a configuration. As for their special abilities, he didn't know what they were exactly, but he had to add that to prevent the restaurant from becoming an orphanage. As for their nonsense, Meg thought that these gods might have some flashbacks of their memories after they reincarnated. Then, they would show signs of mental abnormalities and talk nonsense. There was often only a fine line between a genius and a mental patient. Of course, this point had to be combined with the first 2 points to effectively prevent his restaurant from becoming a mental hospital. With Alex's identity, it should be easier for him to get useful information, right? Irina asked as she stood beside the study table and looked at Meg, who was packing the envelopes. As long as it's something that Alex wants to find, everyone will be looking for it. By then, even if we find it, we won't be able to take it away just because we want to. Meg shook his head with a smile. However, we can inform Michael about this. The only one we can trust now is Chaos City, which wants to maintain the current peace the most. Irina nodded slightly. I will get the Night Elves to collect information and intelligence. Actually, I'm more worried that the Ancient Ones will know about this. Meg put the envelopes aside with a worried expression. You think the Ancient Ones won't let these gods off? The Ancient Ones are all round on the Norland continent. Whether it's technology or top-level power, they are on 2 completely different levels. However, if the gods reincarnate in large numbers, and they might reconstruct their godheads, then the advantage of the underground city's top-level combat power will no longer be there. It's impossible that the gods don't know about the existence of the underground city and the Ancient Ones. In a world of equal power, there can't be an eternal balance because they can threaten each other, Meg said in a low voice. Irina was silent for a while before she self-deprecatingly said, I originally planned to retire after the Night Elves could stand on their own. Now, it seems like that's still very far away. Meg stood up and walked to her side. He hugged her gently, and softly said, Don't worry. I can handle everything. Irina looked up at his side profile, and finally smiled. How can I let you be the only one in the limelight? After sending out the letter, Meg had nothing to do in the afternoon, so he sorted out the dishes that he had learned but had yet to launch in the restaurant. The kitchen was already a little crowded, so he didn't intend to add a cake room to make cakes. He had considered launching the mousse cake in the ice cream shop. Mousse cake had to be refrigerated anyway. As a new product of the ice cream shop, not only could it enrich the menu, but it could also expand the customer base. It was killing 2 birds with 1 stone. Meg went into the kitchen and made 5 mousse cakes. He put them in a freezer and sent them straight to the ice cream shop. Boss, why are you here? Mia asked in surprise when she saw Meg coming in after serving ice cream to a child. End of chapter. Chapter 2368. It was 2 o'clock in the afternoon, the time when the rich ladies in the city came out for afternoon tea. In the past, the rich ladies liked those high-end clubs the most. They would meet up with their friends and drink some red wine that was not intoxicating. That was what they called a small party. Later, the ice cream shop opened. It became the first choice of the rich ladies. At this time, the children were all in school, so the ice cream shop was not too noisy. The elegant and exquisite environment of the ice cream shop, coupled with the delicious ice cream, was a dessert that could not be tasted anywhere else. Naturally, it was highly sought after by the rich ladies. Some of the rich ladies would bring their children who had not yet gone to school, give them an ice cream, and entrust the most gentle Miss Gina in the shop to look after them. Then, they could have a peaceful afternoon. Seeing Meg enter, many of the rich ladies took the initiative to greet him. They also looked curiously at the big box in Meg's hand. Meg smiled in response. They were all regulars of the restaurant, and he knew them all. I made some cakes and brought them over as today's new product. Meg placed the freezer box gently on the counter. New product. The customers in the shop all turned their heads. Pairs of beautiful eyes stared at the box beside Meg, but they did not know what the cake was. Cake? Mia's eyes lit up. Is it the sweet and soft dessert that we had at Amy's birthday? It's soft and sweet. Just these 2 points were enough to easily hit the fancy zone of the noble women present. Could it be a type of ice cream? It sounds like a type of pastry, but I don't know what kind of pastry it is. Mr. Mac's products must be the best. I didn't expect to see the new product at Amy's, but at the ice cream shop. The rich ladies discussed with anticipation. They were curious about the new product that Meg brought. Yes, I made a mango mousse cake today. Meg nodded. He opened the freezer box and took out a golden cake. The golden surface of the cake was almost sparkling. The bottom layer of the cake had a gentle milky yellow color. Its round shape was a little cute. It looks a little cute. Gulp. I want to eat. The ladies couldn't help but swallow their saliva. Wow, it seems different from last time. Mia's eyes also lit up upon hearing this. She was pleasantly surprised that the owner of the ice cream shop was going to release a new product. She had initially thought that the ice cream shop would only sell ice cream forever. Boss, can you reserve a piece? I love eating mangoes. Barbara's eyes widened, and her voice became gentler as she looked at Meg pitifully. Meg glanced at Babla, and a smile appeared on his lips. Speaking of which, Barbara had made a great contribution in sealing the great old one. Before he could reward her with anything, he took out a cake knife from the box. With a few slashes, the cake was divided into 16 evenly sized fan-shaped pieces. Here you go. He took a plate, filled it with a slice of cake, and handed it to Barbara. When the cake was cut open, one could see a very obvious division. The top layer was a golden mirror made of mango paste, and the bottom layer was mango mousse. The middle layer was evenly divided into small pieces of mango pulp. The faint milky fragrance and the fragrance of mango had already begun to spread. The neat knife technique didn't damage the structure of the cake at all. It looked like a carefully carved work of art, and it was only displayed in front of everyone after it was cut open. Thank you, boss. Barbara happily carried the cake to the side and scooped a spoonful of cake into her mouth. Her expression instantly lit up as if a golden light had fallen on her face. It was a happy surprise, a pleasant enjoyment. Barbara felt like she couldn't help but want to exclaim. This was too delicious. She took a light bite. The cool feeling melted in her mouth, but it wasn't as cold as ice cream. Instead, it was a gentle coolness, followed by a sweet sweetness that penetrated her heart. It was sweet but not greasy because of the appearance of the mango. The unique and rich mango aroma brought about the natural flavor of mango. Before the mousse had finished melting in her mouth, the small mango particles brought about a wonderful chewing experience. The rice-sized mango particles didn't appear abrupt because they appeared in the delicate and soft mousse cake. Instead, they were more like juicy exploding pearls, bringing the wonderful experience of fresh fruit to a climax while chewing. Barbara couldn't help but let out a soft moan, and subconsciously clamped her legs together. Oh, this experience was too wonderful. Gulp. The sound of saliva being swallowed could be heard in the restaurant, including the few ladies standing behind the counter. Father, I want to eat this too. Xiao Guai ran over and climbed up Meg's leg with anticipation written all over her little face. Here, take it and eat it yourself. Meg scooped a piece of cake for the little fellow and carefully handed it to her. Thank you, father. Xiao Guai thanked him softly, and then carried the cake to the small table at the side, ready to enjoy her little dessert. This time, the rich ladies in the restaurant couldn't sit still anymore. Mr. Mac, are you selling this egg cake? Bonnie asked. Although the other rich ladies didn't say anything, their expressions already said everything. They were all very interested in this mango mousse cake. Meg had a deep impression of this fierce wife of the young Master Vicenio with kidney deficiency. He smiled and nodded. Yes, this is the ice cream shop's official new product today, mango mousse. The price is 199 yuan per serving, and each person is limited to one serving. No takeouts. Mia quickly wrote an announcement on the small blackboard at the side. Today's new product, mango mousse. Price, 199 copper coins. Limited to one serving. No takeouts. Mia hung the small blackboard beside the price list as a basis for ordering. Then I want one. Bonnie raised her hand. I want one too. I want one too. The rich ladies ordered one after another. Before ping-pong ladies became a trend, most of the people present were real ladies who would close their eyes and order a 199 yuan dessert casually. All right, please wait a moment. Mia replied with a smile. She quickly noted down the order, and then began to serve the cakes to everyone. Out of the 5 cakes, only 6 were left in the end. The rest were all ordered by the rich ladies and children present. Wow! It's too delicious. This has completely overturned my expectations of pastries. What magic did Mr. Mac use to make it so soft and sweet, yet full of the fragrance of fresh mangoes? This is unbelievable. The rich ladies' praises were endless, and the children used their actions to prove their love for this dessert. More than one child took a few bites from the plate. End of chapter. Chapter 2369. Meg won over the group of young ladies with the ultimate deliciousness of the mango mousse cake. Meg gave the remaining 6 pieces of cake to Mia and the rest as a small working lunch. "Mr. Mac, will the ice cream shop still be providing mango mousse cakes tomorrow?" Bonnie asked Meg expectantly. All of the other customers in the restaurant were also looking at Meg with anticipation in their eyes. "Yes. From tomorrow onwards, the ice cream shop will provide about 300 pieces of mango mousse cakes every day." Meg nodded with a smile. Providing 20 pieces of mango mousse cakes a day was an appropriate amount. Because he would continue to introduce tiramisu and matcha mousse in the future, the daily supply would be close to 1,000 pieces. Although it was not as much as the ice cream, it was already very impressive. 300 pieces. A glint flashed across the eyes of the noblewomen. Although they still maintained a reserved look on their faces, they were already planning to come earlier tomorrow so that they could taste such delicious cakes. "Then, will Amy's have this cake?" someone asked. "No, this is the ice cream shop's exclusive dessert. You won't be able to taste it anywhere else on the Norland continent." Meg shook his head with a smile. "All right, everyone, please continue to enjoy your afternoon." Meg carried his cooler and left the ice cream shop. However, he was not in a hurry to go home. Instead, he went to the empty room behind the ice cream shop, and calculated how much space he would need to renovate a cake room to make cakes and desserts. He handed the ice cream shop over to Mia. Mia did a great job. The daily turnover was very high, and the profits were considerable. Therefore, he planned to teach Mia how to make cakes, and let her be in charge of the pastry work. In order to respond to the customers' calls for the new product, Meg released a new product announcement when he returned to the restaurant. Today's new product, steamed yellow croaker. Hilla turned around and smiled at Mary excitedly. "We are lucky to be able to encounter Teacher Meg's new product. We must try it today. Speaking of which, this is my second time eating at Amy's. It's too expensive, and the queue is too long." Mary's delicate face was full of fatigue, and the dark circles under her eyes were very obvious. She forced a smile, but seemed to have a lot on her mind, and was not very interested. Instead, she said worriedly, "Hilla, do you think the children in our class will be very bad at arithmetic in next month's monthly test? I have a feeling that they don't understand what I'm saying." "Don't worry. 2 days ago, I heard from Teacher Sahara that your class is very good. The children also like you very much." Hilla smiled and patted her on the shoulder. The principal also said that the monthly test is to let the children get used to learning and the feeling of an exam. It's not a test for the teachers, so you don't have to be so nervous. As teachers, how can we not care about the children's results? If the children I teach are much worse than the children taught by other teachers, won't I be holding them back? Mary pursed her lips, and her expression was a little conflicted and serious. Hilla looked at Mary helplessly. She had been spending a lot of time with Mary recently, and they had become good friends who could talk about anything. Although Mary was the daughter of a rich family and came from an excellent family, she was too responsible for the children. Every day, she prepared for the children's lessons until midnight. 2 days ago, when the principal said that there would be a monthly test next month, she was so worried that she did not have a good night's sleep for a few days. "Don't worry. The children are going to school for the first time, and many things need time to adapt. Even if they don't perform very well in the monthly test, no one will blame you." Hilla held Mary's arm and said with a smile, "Today, I asked my father for an advance of a month's salary. Today, I'll treat you. I'll treat you to yellow croaker." Mary looked at her and could not help but laugh. "You've only been working for a few days, and this is already the 3rd time you've asked for an advance of your salary, right?" Hilla stuck out her tongue and said matter-of-factly, Isn't it because intern teachers don't get paid much? Actually, it's not much. When we get busy in school, we don't even have time to spend money." "That's true." Mary nodded. During this period, her spending power had been plummeting. Although the school did not stipulate the teacher's attire, she knew that she should be decent and establish the correct values for the students. Therefore, those gorgeous clothes were locked in the closet. Even the number of times she ate at Mamie's had decreased. If Hilla had not dragged her here today, she would have had a simple meal in the school cafeteria and continued preparing for her lessons. Hilla enthusiastically told Mary some of the interesting things she had heard recently. Mary chimed in from time to time, her mind still thinking about tomorrow's lesson plan. The reappearance of the new product announcement, which had not been seen for a long time, aroused the enthusiasm and anticipation of the restaurant's regulars. Fish was considered Meg's specialty. With the steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers and spicy grilled fish as precedents, the taste of this steamed yellow croaker was even more exciting. "Should we eat spicy grilled fish or steamed yellow croaker today?" This is so confusing. Vivian stood at the back of the line with a conflicted expression. She came alone today. If she ordered 2 fish, she might not be able to finish it. That would not be good. She stuck her head out and looked around. Soon, she saw 2 familiar figures in the crowd and her eyes lit up. The restaurant opened and Meg welcomed the customers in with a smile. Hilla and Mary had just sat down when Vivian sat opposite them with a smile. Teacher Hilla, Teacher Mary, what a coincidence. You're also here for dinner at Mamie's today? Hilla and Mary were stunned when they saw Vivian. Teacher Vivian, you're here for dinner too? I didn't see you just now. Hilla was pleasantly surprised. She was in charge of the school's administrative work. Although she was not close to Vivian, she was still quite familiar with her. Mary only nodded slightly to greet her. She was not familiar with Vivian. She only knew that she was the mayor's daughter and had a good relationship with the principal. She probably had connections? I was behind you in the line just now. I only saw you 2 recently. I'm here for dinner alone today. Is it okay if I sit with you too? Vivian said with a smile. Of course. Hilla nodded. Maylee also nodded her head. Mamie's had a tradition of sharing tables. Compared to eating with complete strangers, Vivian was definitely a better choice. Vivian flipped open the menu and her gaze quickly landed on the shiny golden steamed yellow croaker under the seafood category. Her eyes lit up. Then, she saw the same shiny golden price, 5,000 copper coins for one. This steamed yellow croaker looks good. Shall we share one? Vivian pushed the menu in front of them and asked with a smile. I'm not running away, I'm bringing my girlfriend and mother-in-law back to my hometown for the next 2 days. It's my first time here, so I have to bring them out for a walk. Sorry. End of chapter. Chapter 2370. Hilla looked at the golden price and fell silent for a while. She quickly came to a consensus with Vivian, and nodded as she said, I think this is a good suggestion. Let's compete for a steamed yellow croaker. We can't finish such a big fish on our own anyway. When young ladies saw something that they liked, they would all fork out money to try it out. This had gradually become a trend among the young people in Chaos City. As for the 3 ladies present, they were well aware of each other's family background. A teacher's salary at Hope School was 3,500 copper coins a month, which was enough for a spicy grilled fish, but far from enough to eat a large yellow croaker. Of course, if they were only living on their monthly salary, they wouldn't have stepped into this restaurant. Mary looked at the golden steamed yellow croaker on the menu, and still couldn't bring herself to eat it. However, seeing how excited her 2 colleagues were, she didn't want to dampen their spirits, so she nodded, and said, I think it's fine. Vivian's smile widened. She turned to place her order with Mia, and ordered a spicy grilled fish for herself. She could taste the new dish and eat her favorite spicy grilled fish at the same time. Such a win-win situation could only happen at Mamie's. Why you're ordering 2 fish? Hilla, who was about to order 2 more dishes, looked at Vivian with surprise. Yes. I love spicy grilled fish the most. I order it for every meal at Mamie's. Vivian nodded with a smile. Then, she emphasized, I'm only ordering for myself. Do you want anything? Hilla quickly shook her head, and said, we don't need anything. We'll just try the steamed yellow croaker. We plan to order a red braised pork and eggplant with garlic sauce to go with our rice. Vivian nodded, and didn't say anything else. As the new dish of the day, the steamed yellow croaker attracted a lot of attention from the customers. However, the dazzling price of 5,000 copper coins made many customers flinch. This was the most expensive dish on Mamie's menu at the moment, apart from the Buddha jumps over the wall that could solve the problem of baldness. It wasn't that many customers couldn't afford it, but according to the usual practice, expensive new products often required a brave warrior to test the poison and clear the minds for the general public. Therefore, when Vivian was the first to order the steamed yellow croaker, everyone looked at her with respect. Mia agreed with a smile. She was already used to the customer's way of doing things. She reported Vivian's order to the kitchen. She had already tasted how delicious the steamed yellow croaker was during her last trip to the island. Its extreme freshness was completely different from the spicy grilled fish and the spicy fish head with diced hot red peppers. Meg had long since noticed that the 3 teachers from Hope Academy were sitting at a table. He sighed at how rich people nowadays like to become teachers. He had already caught a fresh yellow croaker from the fish pond and began to slaughter it. There was only one large yellow croaker in the translucent fish tank. Every time he caught one, another would be added. It was guaranteed that every single fish was directly supplied from the deep sea to the kitchen of the restaurant. Wild yellow croakers were also very precious seafood in his previous life. For example, the one in Meg's hand was a top-grade yellow croaker with fine golden scales that looked like it was plated with a layer of golden armor. Furthermore, it was still fresh and could easily be sold for tens of thousands of copper coins. However, at Mamie's, you only needed 5,000 copper coins to taste the steamed yellow croaker personally cooked by the best chefs. It was definitely a good price, all right. The processed large yellow croaker was simply marinated at the side before being steamed in the pot. The top-grade ingredients often only required the simplest cooking method. For a fresh top-grade ingredient like the large yellow croaker, it didn't require many side dishes to suppress the fishy smell, nor did it require many condiments to blend the taste. It was steamed in a special steamer for 3 minutes before the fire was turned off. A golden steamed yellow croaker was ready to be served. He made a cut on the back of the fish and placed it on the plate with both sides facing outwards with its belly connected. The large yellow croaker's fine scales weren't scraped off, and it still emitted a dazzling golden glow after being steamed. After sprinkling some shredded ginger and chopped green onions, the fresh aroma had already spread. However, when Yabamiya walked out of the kitchen with this steamed yellow croaker, a ray of light happened to fall on the large yellow croaker on the plate. The dazzling light made everyone's eyes light up. On the other hand, the alluring fresh aroma of the large yellow croaker made the customers sitting at the side of the aisle swallow their saliva uncontrollably. Unlike the strong and aggressive aroma of the spicy grilled fish, this steamed yellow croaker's aroma was much gentler. It was like a well-bred lady with half of her shoulders exposed, making people feel comfortable and couldn't help but drool. "Your steamed yellow croaker," Yabamiya said with a smile as he placed the fish in front of Vivian and the others. "Wow, it looks really good. There's actually such a beautiful fish." Hilla's eyes were sparkling, reflecting the golden light. "It looks a little too bland?" Vivian was a little hesitant. As a loyal fan of spicy grilled fish, she found this steamed yellow croaker to be a little bland. She didn't know if she could get used to it, and she was even a little skeptical about whether the fishy aroma of the fish could be suppressed. Mary's dejected nose twitched, and her eyes lit up at the sight of the intricate and vibrant large yellow croaker. She had been under too much pressure during the past few days, and she hadn't been sleeping well, so her appetite had also been very poor. Looking at this large yellow croaker and smelling its delicate aroma, she was starting to salivate. "Do you want to try it?" Hilla picked up her chopsticks as she turned to the two of them. Of course, Vivian also picked up her chopsticks. Seeing as the dish had already been ordered, there was no reason not to try it. Besides, she still had a spicy grilled fish. "Let's try it." Mary nodded as she picked up a piece of fish meat near the tail of the fish. The tiny fish scales fell off with a gentle touch, revealing the tender white flesh beneath. She picked up the piece of fish meat and dipped it in the gravy on the plate before placing it into her mouth. Mary's expectant expression instantly stiffened, and an incredulous look gradually appeared on her face. The fish meat had a tender texture, and it was rich and fragrant. The saltiness of the gravy was unable to overpower the freshness of the fish meat, and the tender fish meat was imbued with an extreme freshness and sweetness. This appeared to be a very simple dish. It had been cooked using a steaming method, and even the amount of seasoning and condiments was noticeably minimal. However, it was exactly this simple cooking method that allowed the freshness of this large yellow croaker to be brought out to the fullest. Her taste buds felt as if spring rain had brushed past them, and the tender fish meat turned into a warm current that slid down her throat into her stomach. Then, there seemed to be a strange feeling that slowly rose into her mind, making her tense nerves relax a little. What an incredible delicacy. This must be a fish from the ocean, right? Mary tried her best to suppress the excitement in her voice as she praised. Chapter 2371. Maylee was intoxicated by the deliciousness of the steamed large yellow croaker fish, and even forgot about many of her troubles. She suddenly felt the beauty of life again, and her mind gradually became clearer. The smiles of her children were indeed more important than those digital results. She had been too caught up in the results, and had lost herself. It's so delicious. The flavor is light, but it's extremely fresh and sweet. I didn't think there would be such a delicious fish in this world. Hilla was also full of praise as she looked at the large yellow croaker fish in front of her with surprise. Is this plain-looking steamed fish really so delicious? Vivian murmured in her heart as she also picked up a piece of fish and put it into her mouth. The faint saltiness of the broth first aroused the interest of her taste buds, followed by the tender and sweet taste of the fish meat. Unlike the spicy grilled fish, which was crispy on the outside and tender on the inside, the large yellow croaker fish was softer and more delicate, and brought out the deliciousness of the fish meat to its fullest. It was a deliciousness that made the taste buds cheer, and a taste that made the body excited. Isn't this too awesome? He's using the steaming method to make such delicious fish. As expected of Mr. Mac. Vivian picked up a second piece of fish meat with her chopsticks and praised. Even though the three beauties were trying to maintain their composure, their love and admiration for this steamed large yellow croaker fish could not be concealed. The customers around them swallowed their saliva, and soon, someone began to order light, delicious, sea fish. For the customers who could not accept the spicy grilled fish and steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, this dish completely made up for their regret of not being able to eat fish. The price of 5,000 copper coins was not cheap, but Amy's was never short of rich people. Delicious steamed large yellow croaker fish were brought out of the kitchen one after another, and were served on the tables of the customers, eliciting waves of praise. Vivian had eaten almost half of the steamed large yellow croaker fish, and her spicy grilled fish was also brought to the table. Let's eat together. The spicy grilled fish is more spicy. Vivian's attention was immediately diverted, and she said enthusiastically. Vivian had not interacted much with Hilla and Maylee before this, but the experience of sharing a table with them today was quite good. The simple interactions had deepened their understanding, and their relationship had become a lot closer. Let's eat together? Hilla nodded with a smile. Their red braised pork and eggplant with garlic sauce were also brought to the table. As for the steamed yellow croaker, at this moment, only a clean fish bone was left. A smile also appeared on Mary's face. At this moment, her state had become much more relaxed. Vivian took a few bites of the spicy grilled fish before taking a large gulp of ice water. She looked at Mary with a hint of envy in her eyes, and said, "Mary, I heard that the children you teach are all very impressive. I passed by the principal's office yesterday, and I overheard a few of the teachers praising you for being very capable." Really? Mary's chopsticks faltered in midair as she looked up at Vivian with incredulity in her eyes. "Yes, he said that you are very responsible, which is very rare among young teachers." Vivian nodded with certainty. Mary blushed, but the corners of her mouth could not hide her joy. She smiled and shook her head. "I only did what I should do. I told you not to worry. Everyone saw what you did. You don't have to worry about the exams next month." Hilla winked at her and said with a smile. After dinner, the three of them parted ways at the entrance of the dining hall. Mary boarded the carriage and lifted a corner of the curtains. The cool spring breeze blew on her face, but it could not wipe away the smile on her face. That night, she had a good sleep. It was a rare night without dreams. When she opened her eyes the next morning, she felt very comfortable and full of energy. She sat in front of the dressing mirror and was surprised to find that the dark circles under her eyes had disappeared. She had regained the liveliness of a young girl. Is sleep really the best beauty medicine? Mary's fingers gently stroked her cheeks as a confident smile appeared on her face. "Hello, Teacher Mary." She had been troubled by insomnia and her emotions for a long time, but after a good sleep, she finally walked out. Could it be because I ate the steamed yellow croaker? Mary tilted her head and thought. If there was a difference between what she did yesterday, it would be going to Mamie's to eat the yellow croaker. Mary tied up her hair and changed into a black robe before confidently going to school. "Teacher Mary, you look very energetic today. Teacher Mary, you look really beautiful today." Walking on the campus, Mary received a lot of praise from teachers and children. This made the smile on Mary's face become even more confident. She felt that the bright and beautiful sunlight on her body had become a bit warmer. "Oh, my God, Mary, you look really beautiful today. It's like you're a different person. It seems that you had a good sleep yesterday." Hilla came out of the office with a stack of documents in her arms. When she saw Mary, her eyes immediately lit up. "Hilla, you look very beautiful today too." Mary smiled and then walked closer to her. She lowered her voice and said, "Let's go to Mamie's for dinner tonight. It's my treat." Yes. Hilla nodded repeatedly. Meg's advanced class for the God of Cookery had become the most discussed topic in Hope School for the past 2 days. After witnessing Meg's godly cooking skills and tasting the delicious Yangzhou fried rice, the children in the advanced class had already regarded Meg as a legend. And after entering the advanced class for the God of Cookery, they could taste the most delicious food in the world. This also made the magnificent building for the God of Cookery a holy land for many children. The registration for the first class had already ended. The next class would be in a month. Many children had already secretly made up their minds to work hard to eat. Work hard to improve their strength. The advanced class for the God of Cookery was the most difficult practical class to enter in Hope School. This had already become the consensus of the children. Therefore, the children who had entered the list of the 32 people had also become the object of envy of many people. Baker, tell me again, how delicious was that Yangzhou fried rice? A few children surrounded Baker and looked at him expectantly. Baker scratched his head shyly. Didn't I tell you a few times yesterday? Let's not talk about it anymore. Just tell us, we'll just listen to satisfy our cravings. Yeah, I was drooling when I heard it yesterday. I dreamt of eating a big meal last night. I was so satisfied. The children smiled and urged him. Baker looked around. Seeing that his classmates were so enthusiastic, he couldn't refuse. He coughed softly and said, "This Yangzhou fried rice was cooked with a total of 10 ingredients. Among them, there were prawns as thick as an arm, savory ham. After the dazzling stir-frying, a Yangzhou fried rice that was as gorgeous as a rainbow was finally ready to be served." He scooped a spoonful and put it into his mouth. The egg almost melted in his mouth. The winter bamboo shoots and green beans cut into the size of rice grains were crispy and delicious. The rice wrapped in the egg was full of sweetness after being chewed carefully. The soft ham was mixed into the rice, and there seemed to be the taste of prawns in it. All kinds of flavors were contained in one bite. After one bite, he felt warm all over, and the fragrance of the rice still lingered between his lips and teeth. It's amazing. Gulp, end of chapter. Chapter 2372. Baker used a simple and unpretentious description to successfully evoke the endless imagination of his classmates about Yangzhou fried rice. If it weren't for Baker's description, they wouldn't even be able to imagine such a delicious dish. Everyone looked at Baker with even more envy. He was the only one in their class who was chosen by Mr. Meg. His height didn't meet the requirements, but he was specially allowed to join the advanced class for the Master of Cookery by Mr. Meg. "Baker, when will Mr. Meg recruit new students?" a kid asked. The other kids also looked at Baker expectantly. "I don't know." Baker shook his head. "But there are still many empty stoves in the training center. I think Mr. Meg will continue to recruit new students." The students were slightly disappointed. This answer was almost the same as not answering at all. "Baker, have you learned how to make Yangzhou fried rice? Can you make some for us?" another student asked. The children's gazes all fell on Baker. "I haven't learned yet." Baker shook his head, but there was a confident smile on his face. "But I will definitely learn. Then when you learn, you must be the first one to cook for me. This pen is for you." The chubby kid at Baker's desk put a pen in his hand and started to bribe him. Baker looked at the pen in his hand. This was the pen that his desk mate had been reluctant to borrow yesterday. He didn't expect him to give it to him so easily today. "This eraser is for you. I drew this picture myself. It's for you too." For the first time since he was young, Beck felt welcome. This feeling was quite good. The class bell rang, and the students returned to their seats. Baker looked at the small pile of gifts in front of him. He was touched and decided to study hard to become an excellent chef, so that his classmates could have a chance to eat as much as they wanted. "Barbara, how did it feel to go to class today?" At the lunch table, Yabamiya asked curiously. The girls who were about to eat also looked at Barbara. "Don't mention it. Those two brats were hung upside down by me for an entire class. One of them actually learned some spatial magic. It's just that he's not very talented. I think he'll only be at the level of serving dishes in the future." Barbara sighed softly with a hint of helplessness in her voice. "Then isn't it just right for him? When you retire, he can take over," Irina said seriously. Barbara raised her eyebrows and quickly shook her head. "That little brat's serving skills are far from my level. Madam, you don't need to consider it." "What about Shirley?" Meg looked to Shirley. "I added 3 children at the last minute. They're not bad. They're hardworking and willing to learn," Shirley said calmly. Her words were very gentle. Generally speaking, for those children who don't have much talent, they can be summed up with the words down-to-earth and hardworking. Because other than these two, there is really nothing else worth praising. Barbara looked at Shirley with a smile, and said, "Hey, it's only the first day of class, and you've already become so slick? Being down-to-earth and diligent has always been an excellent quality to me. If you want to become an excellent archer, you have to be down-to-earth and diligent in your studies," Shirley said with a serious expression. "Big sister Shirley, can little Guy learn archery?" Little Guy put down his spoon and licked the corner of his mouth as he asked Shirley seriously. A gentle smile appeared on Shirley's face. "I'll teach you archery when little Guy is a little older." "No, little Guy wants to learn now. Little Guy wants to ride Ugly Duckling and shoot swans with a bow," little Guy said coquettishly with a pout. Ugly Duckling, who was eating seriously at the side, shrunk its neck and changed its direction, pretending not to hear it. Shirley looked up at Meg with a helpless expression. "Little Guy can't draw a bow and shoot yet. When you're a little older, big sister Shirley will bring you to hunt. Meg stroked little Guy's head with a smile. The little fellow wasn't even as tall as a bough, so it was a little difficult for Shirley to teach her archery. You don't have to learn archery to hunt. Little Guy, you can learn magic from big sister, and you can also kill monsters. Amy grabbed a drumstick with one hand, and raised her left hand. An icy blue ice arrow quickly formed, and with a flick of her finger, it turned into a stream of light and flew out of the unlatched window at the back. Wow! Big sister Amy is so awesome. Little Guy's eyes were wide open as he clapped his little hands in admiration. Amy's desire to be a teacher was greatly satisfied. She took a bite of the drumstick, and continued, "It's actually very simple. You just have to learn from me. Look at your palm, imagine the ice arrow, and then shout, 'Come out!' It will appear." Everyone. Was this something that could be done just by imagining it? Little Guy stretched out her left hand, and looked at her little palm with a serious expression. Meg and Irina looked at each other, and both of them were on their guard. "Come out!" Little Guy called out softly. The ice arrow didn't appear, but a golden trident appeared in Little Guy's palm. A powerful aura emanated from the trident, causing everyone's expression to change. What is this?" Camilla exclaimed. She felt a terrifying aura from the trident. It was a fear that came from the depths of her soul. Godly artifact. Barbara suddenly stood up, and looked at the trident in disbelief. She had only felt such a terrifying aura from the white jade staff hidden in the Moon Nation's palace. It was said to be a godly artifact that was found in the ruins of the Holy Land, and it was passed down by the Moon Nation's kings from generation to generation. It appeared again? Meg was also a little surprised. This wasn't the first time he had seen this trident. It was just that the trident had disappeared into Little Guy's body after it had shrunk. He didn't expect Little Guy to summon it this time. Wow, an arrow with 3 arrowheads? Little Guy's eyes lit up, and she turned to throw the trident out. Wait! Meg hurriedly stopped her. If she threw this treasure out, his restaurant would probably be razed to the ground. That wasn't the most important thing. Most importantly, there were many powerhouses from Chaos City standing in line outside. If they witnessed this scene, it would be difficult for Little Guy to hide her identity. "Little Guy, let's put this away first. When the restaurant is closed in a few days, Daddy will take you out of the city to hunt, alright?" Meg said gently. He didn't want Little Guy to attack when he wasn't paying attention. But Little Guy also wants to try throwing it out. Little Guy looked at the golden trident that was about a meter long in her palm, and was very eager to give it a try. Chapter 2373. Xiao Guai pulled out a trident that exuded an astonishing aura, causing everyone in the restaurant to stare with their mouths wide open. Gina's expression changed slightly. She was a little anxious. She pulled a long face, and sternly said, "Be good, Little Guai. Put it away." Little Guai looked at Gina, and immediately became obedient. However, it looked at the trident in its palm, and helplessly said, "But, I don't know how to put it away." "Little Guai, you called 'come out.' And it came out. Why don't you try calling it 'go back'?" Amy suggested. "All right." Little Guai nodded. Then, it shouted at the trident, "Go back." Swoosh! A golden light flashed, and the trident shrunk into a spot of light instantly. It really disappeared just like that. Everyone. Was it that careless? All right, hurry up and eat. You can't call it out so casually in the future. Gina picked up a piece of red braised pork for Little Guai. Although she looked at it lovingly, her tone was rather stern. "Oh." Little Guai answered innocently. Then, it continued to chew on the soft and fragrant red braised pork without a care in the world. Little Guai's unintentional move made everyone even more curious about its background. Although they weren't sure about the trident's background, that pressure and aura couldn't lie. This little cutie that Gina brought back from outside might really have an impressive background. Little Guai is still young. "Let's not spread what happened in our restaurant," Meg said casually as he poured a bowl of rice for himself. It wasn't that he didn't trust the ladies. It was just that their identities were rather special, and they could come into contact with the real elites of the Norland continent. If they accidentally leaked some information about Little Guai, it would inevitably attract some trouble. The ladies were deep in thought, and nodded to show that they understood. "Little Anna, I didn't see you sign up for my class," Meg said to Anna with a smile. "The teacher said that I can only sign up for one practical training course." Anna put down her chopsticks. "So, you chose Shirley's class and gave up on mine?" Meg looked hurt. "I can learn how to cook from Uncle Meg after school. It won't be a problem at all." Anna winked with a smile and said slyly, "And I can learn it every day." No, I have holidays too. Meg shook his head. You can only study for 6 days a week. Yes, for the remaining day, I can learn archery and magic from Sister Shirley. Anna nodded with a smile. Shirley smiled and gave Anna another bowl of rice. I feel like I'm almost full, Anna said, looking at her. If you want to grow taller quickly so that you can attend Boss's advanced class for the God of Cookery, then eat your food obediently, Shirley said calmly. All right. Anna picked up her chopsticks and returned to being a heartless eater. Dukas restaurant was gradually becoming outdated. During lunchtime, there were only a few scattered tables of customers in the huge hall. It was a far cry from the past when it was always full. Restaurant manager Alva sat behind the counter with a frown. He sighed, got up, and went to the kitchen. He looked at Beat, who was in a daze in front of the stove, and asked, I heard that Mamie's just released a new dish yesterday. It's steamed yellow croaker that costs 5,000 copper coins. Can we learn this dish? Beat looked at Alva, and shook his head helplessly. No one can really imitate his dish successfully. Dukas restaurant started to decline after Mamie's snatched the title of the #1 restaurant in Chaos City from Dukas restaurant. Compared to Mamie's that kept releasing new dishes and setting new trends in the culinary world again and again, Dukas restaurant's old menu and bland food were gradually abandoned by the customers. Even the roast suckling pig that was once known as the #1 delicacy in Chaos City was labeled as oily. Beat was initially unconvinced, but now, he was lying flat on the ground and taking a beating. This was all because of the setbacks. Now, Mamie's had become the first choice of the rich people in Chaos City. They would rather line up for an hour or two than eat at Dukas restaurant. After Mamie's, there was Manna Hot Pot restaurant. This large-scale hot pot restaurant took in most of the customers that were diverted from Mamie's. Aside from that, many restaurants that copied Mamie's menu had appeared in the Aden Square recently. Although the taste was just passable, it was very gimmicky. Many customers who couldn't afford to eat Mamie's had a place to try it, and it also attracted a lot of customers. Due to all these factors, Dukas restaurant only had a few private rooms and customers who needed a quiet environment to discuss business. There were even fewer customers in the spacious hall than there were waiters idling around. Alva scratched his head as he looked at the chefs and staff in the kitchen. He gritted his teeth, and said, if we don't make any changes, our restaurant is going to close down. I don't care what method you use, but you have to learn this dish and make it our new signature dish. Even if it's gimmicky, it'll at least bring us some customers. Beat wanted to refuse Alva's offer, but his pride as a head chef made him disdain to do something like this. If Dukas restaurant closes down, it'll be very difficult for you to find another job as a head chef, Alva said in a cold voice. Beat's expression stiffened, and he slowly lowered his head as he gave an affirmative response. I'm going to cancel all of my reservations tonight. Go to Mamie's and try out their fish. It said that it's a very simple dish. Alva looked at Beat from head to toe, and said, I suggest you change your clothes before you go, and put on some makeup that won't be easily seen. There's a barber shop in the western part of the city that specializes in this area. Beat nodded before taking off his apron and leaving. He turned to look at Dukas restaurant's signboard with a complex expression. He had built this restaurant's reputation with his own 2 hands, but now, he could only watch as it deteriorated to the point where he was forced to plagiarize other chefs' dishes. I can't just watch you collapse, Beat said as he strode away. In the evening, Beat, who had changed into a set of luxurious black clothes, appeared in the line outside of Mamie's. His eyebrows had become much thicker, and his fair face had become much darker. A thick beard covered nearly half of his face, making him look completely different from his original appearance. Beat tidied up his clothes, and he was cautious and nervous. This was the first time he had eaten at Mamie's, and he really didn't want to be recognized by others. He wanted to save face. However, while he was queuing up, he heard the surrounding diners fervently discussing the delicacies of Mamie's. They were arguing over the taste of a dish, and they had become close friends because of their love for the same dish. Beat felt that this kind of pure affection for each other because of delicacies was extremely beautiful. It's just a dish. I should be able to understand it after tasting it, Beat thought to himself. He raised his head to look at the restaurant signboard. One day, he would take back everything that he had lost. Welcome to Mamie's. The restaurant's doors opened, and Meg walked out with a smile on his face. End of chapter. Chapter 2374. As the customers entered the restaurant, Meg greeted them with familiarity. There were also some unfamiliar faces who happily called him Mr. Mac and expressed that they were fans of his. Then, a familiar name jumped into his eyes. Beat, male, human, 45 years old, Meg looked at the tall man with dark skin and a full beard. He looked like a businessman who was constantly on the move, and the corners of his mouth curled up slightly. Meg was the head chef of Dukas restaurant and had competed with him before. Naturally, he wouldn't be so forgetful. However, his makeup was quite exquisite. If it weren't for the omniscient door, he wouldn't have recognized him at first glance. But what was he doing at Mamie's instead of working in the kitchen of Dukas restaurant at this hour? In his impression, Dukas restaurant's business should be good. Could it be that he's also here to learn? Meg raised his eyebrows thoughtfully. He nodded at Beat with a smile and didn't say anything else. During this period of time, a portion of Mamie restaurant's customers were chefs from other restaurants, and he was well aware of that. The most obvious characteristic of these people was that they had been here for a few consecutive days and had ordered the same dish every time. They ate slowly and carefully, nodding their heads from time to time. Most of the time, they would be scratching their ears and cheeks in distress. Beat entered the restaurant and looked around. He chose a seat that faced the kitchen and sat down. He could see the interior of the kitchen through the crystal. This was the first time he had entered Mamie's. Although he had heard many rumors and news, he was still a little surprised when he saw the bold design of the kitchen in person. One had to know that a chef valued the privacy of their recipes the most. They would rather be the only one in the kitchen when they were cooking so that their recipes wouldn't be stolen by others. Just like when he was cooking the roast pig, the seasonings used for the marinating and roasting process were all mixed at home and brought to the restaurant. He was the only one who knew the method of marinating and roasting the roast pig. This was the reason why he was able to secure his position as the head chef of Dukas restaurant for more than 10 years. It was also the way for a chef to survive in the workplace. However, Meg overturned this rule. He opened the kitchen door so that everyone could see what he was doing. One had to realize that Meg was currently the most sought-after chef on the Norland continent. His reputation had spread far and wide through the pages of gourmet magazines. Beat had already observed more than 8 chefs in the restaurant, including the one sitting beside him. They were probably sitting here for the same reason as him. However, Meg didn't care about the existence of these peepers and plagiarists. He even published the recipe of eggplant with garlic sauce in a gourmet magazine and the recipe of braised pork in a children's picture book. Beat felt as if he were a despicable mouse at this moment, and he shifted his body uncomfortably. However, he had no choice. He had to save his career and save the troubled Dukas restaurant. I'll just do it this time. After I master this dish, I'll definitely never do something like this again, Beat thought to himself as he flipped open the menu on the table. The exquisite dishes on the menu struck awe and veneration in his heart. As a chef, he was well aware of how difficult it was to create a delicious dish. Meg's creativity was astonishing. Every dish on the menu was so unique. He used all kinds of cooking methods to combine ingredients that didn't seem to fit together to create one delicious dish after another. His gaze then fell on the shimmering golden steamed yellow croaker. This was a fish that Beat had never seen before. It appeared to be some kind of marine fish, and it was as if it had been forged from gold. Compared to the spicy grilled fish and steamed fish head with diced hot red peppers, the steamed yellow croaker appeared to be a lot more bland. Yabamiya made her way over to Beat, and asked, "What would you like to order, sir?" Beat closed the menu, and replied, "I'd like a steamed yellow croaker and a dish of eggplant with garlic sauce." "Okay, please wait for a moment." Mia nodded with a smile. Beat leaned back comfortably in his chair, and it seemed as if he was admiring the busy chef in the kitchen. This was one of the joys of the customers sitting near the kitchen while waiting for their dishes to be served. After the orders were reported to the kitchen, Beat watched as Meg scooped the fried rice from the wok, took out 10 beggar's chickens from the oven, and placed 2 servings of Buddha jumps over the wall soup on the counter. Then, he walked toward the fish tank at the side. "He's here." Beat's body leaned forward slightly, and his gaze was fixed on Meg. Analyzing the cooking method of a dish wasn't as efficient as watching the chef cook directly. The ingredients, the heat, and the steps needed to be analyzed would take an unknown amount of time. However, if he could watch Meg do it once, he was confident that he would be able to learn it. Meg reached into the fish tank, and when he pulled it out, he was already holding a 1 kilogram yellow croaker. Cutting the fish, cleaning it, and steaming it, Meg's movements were so fast that Beat's eyes couldn't keep up with them. During this time, over 100 beef kebabs were served, and 2 steaks were served. When Meg closed the lid of the steamer and continued to move between the various stoves, and cook several dishes at the same time, Beat's mouth was still wide open, and he had a dumbfounded expression on his face. Did he learn it? Eyes? Hands? That's right, he couldn't even clearly see what Meg was doing. His movements were too fast, and he finished too much work in a short period of time. It was impossible for others to keep up with his pace. Beat only saw a few general steps, and didn't see what condiments and ingredients were used. It seems like I can only rely on tasting it to recover. Beat's heart sank slightly. About 5 minutes later, the large yellow croaker was out of the oven, and Meg directly carried it to the counter at the side. Your steamed large yellow croaker and eggplant with garlic sauce. Soon, 2 dishes floated out of the kitchen and landed steadily in front of Beat. Mamie's had a unique way of serving dishes, and it was controlled by a spatial magic caster. Other restaurants couldn't afford to hire a spatial magic caster. Beat's gaze was already attracted by the steamed large yellow croaker in front of him. The shimmering large yellow croaker wasn't very large, and it had a streamlined body. The fish had been sliced in half down the middle, and it was spread out on a long plate. The shimmering golden scales were still shimmering with a golden light even after being cooked, and the thin and tender green onions were embellished on top of the scales, creating a delicious aroma. Gulp! Beat's throat rolled. The aroma of this dish wasn't as aggressive as the spicy grilled fish of his deskmate, but it still possessed great power and enticement. There was only a thin layer of refreshing broth, and there were no other side dishes on the entire fish. The large yellow croaker was the main character of this dish, and the green onions couldn't even be considered a side dish. End of chapter. Chapter 2375. Yes, this fish looked too simple. It could be seen at a glance. However, this didn't affect the intense visual impact and delicious taste that this fish brought to the diners. Steaming was a method that was rarely used to cook fish. Chefs would always use all kinds of strong spices to cover up the fishy smell of the fish. However, one had to admit that steaming preserved the exquisite appearance of this large yellow croaker fish. Its golden scales were shining like gold, making it the most beautiful fish on the table. Green onions and fish. Beat quickly made a mental note of these 2 dishes. Of course, he didn't believe that this dish of steamed large yellow croaker fish only had these 2 side dishes. Before serving the dish, the chef would remove some side dishes and spices that would affect the appearance of the dish. Then, he would add some side dishes that had nothing to do with the cooking process, but had a beautiful color. Beat picked up his chopsticks and lightly sliced the fish's body. The golden scales were cut open and fell off, revealing the tender and white fish meat underneath. He first picked up a piece of fish meat that was located above the fish's body. It was covered by the fish scales and wasn't soaked in the broth. This should be the most simple and pure original taste, which could better display the skill of a chef. When the fish meat entered his mouth, it was incomparably fresh and tender. The extremely fresh taste lingered on the tip of his tongue, mixed with a faint salty fragrance. It was so pure and natural that one would be intoxicated by it. There wasn't the slightest fishy smell. Beat was slightly shocked. One had to know that apart from the faint salty fragrance of the fish meat, he didn't feel much of the smell of spices and spices. This was the original taste of large yellow croaker fish. He was 100% sure that this was a saltwater fish. Such a fish didn't exist in the inland areas. Steaming it brought out the original taste of the fish to the greatest extent. The heat was just right, making the fish meat fresh and tender. It had a wonderful elasticity in the mouth, making it impossible for one to stop eating. After that, he picked up a piece of fish meat from the tail. It had been soaked in the broth, which should be the part that had the most flavor. When the fish meat entered his mouth, it was still fresh and sweet. However, after being soaked in the broth, it had a rich sauce fragrance. When the sauce blended with the fish meat, it burst forth with a new and wonderful taste. He couldn't tell what kind of sauce it was. It didn't have a strong taste, but it had a unique aroma. It complemented the steamed fish perfectly. It was mellow and fragrant, tender, smooth, and refreshing. Beat raised his eyebrows, and his eyes narrowed into slits. Aside from the aroma of the sauce, there seemed to be a few condiments and side dishes in the broth as well. However, the aroma of these side dishes was extremely bland, and they seemed to only play a minor role in the broth. Yet, they were like the finishing touch that enhanced the flavor of the steamed large yellow croaker to another level. However, no matter how hard he searched through the various seasonings and side dishes in his mind, he still couldn't find a match. He took one bite after another of the fish, but his brows were tightly knitted together. His specially styled hairstyle was also messed up. It was so delicious that it made him go bald. There was nothing he could do. He really had no way to analyze it. However, he wasn't the only one who was behaving like this. The middle-aged man sitting beside him was chewing on the grilled fish as he stared at the grilled fish with reddened eyes. He had already eaten more than half of the fish, and his mouth was also swollen. However, he still didn't know how this spicy grilled fish was cooked. Soon, only the skeleton of Beat's steamed large yellow croaker was left. He stared at the plate in silence for a while before picking up a spoon and drinking the broth. After that, he also finished the broth, and fell into silence again. After a while, he finished 2 bowls of rice with the eggplant with garlic sauce before paying the bill and leaving. "I'm so full." After walking out of Mamie's, Beat rubbed his stomach. This was the most delicious meal he had eaten in a while. "This way." Alva poked his head out of a nearby horse-drawn carriage and waved at Beat. Beat looked around, and seeing that no one was paying attention, he quickly boarded the horse-drawn carriage. The horse-drawn carriage drove away from Mamie's, and Alva looked at Beat with an expectant expression as he asked, "Did you learn how to cook it?" Beat wanted to shake his head, but at the sight of Alva's expectant expression, he thought better of it, and nodded as he replied, "I did." "That's great. Then make one when we get back? If the taste is guaranteed, we'll release the new dish tomorrow." Alva clapped his hands excitedly. "I'm afraid that won't do." Beat shook his head. "What?" Alva's smile faded, and he asked, "Are you lying to me? If we want to cook steamed large yellow croaker, we have to find a reliable supplier of large yellow croaker fish. The core of this dish is large yellow croaker fish, so we won't be able to cook any other fish," Beat replied. Alva chuckled, and said, "It's just a fish. If he can get it, then we can get it too. This should be a saltwater fish. There are seafood merchants in Chaos City, but the supply isn't very stable. Besides, I've never seen this type of fish from them." Alva's brows furrowed, but he still waved a hand, and said, "Don't worry about that, I'll take care of the problem with the fish. Go back and do some research on how to cook this steamed large yellow croaker fish, and see if it can really be replicated perfectly." "All right." Beat nodded and didn't say anything else. If Alva really could find large yellow croaker fish, then he really was confident that he would be able to cook a delicious steamed large yellow croaker fish. This was a fish that was extremely delicious even if it was simply steamed. Even if he couldn't replicate Meg's cooking method, as long as he could concoct a suitable broth and properly control the heat of the steaming process, he should be able to cook a decent steamed large yellow croaker fish. If Alva couldn't find large yellow croaker fish, then that would be easy to deal with. Without large yellow croaker fish, there was no way he could cook a dish like steamed large yellow croaker fish. What did that have to do with him, head chef Beat? After the dinner service, Mia turned to Meg, who had just emerged from the kitchen, and grumbled, "More and more chefs have been coming to our restaurant recently. There are also more and more restaurants in the Aiden Square that are using our dishes as their names. Boss, are you really not going to do anything about it?" "Yeah, I heard someone complaining about the braised chicken on the way here yesterday. She said that the braised chicken wasn't anything special, and that the chicken was too tough and didn't taste good at all. She said that even Mamie's wasn't anything special." Barbara chimed in, but she was clearly eating at a dark little restaurant on the side of the road with the name Braised Chicken and Rice, but our restaurant was the scapegoat. That was so infuriating. "The worst thing was that I saw a new restaurant on the way here yesterday, and it was using the name Rice Selling Restaurant. Isn't that a scam?" All of the young ladies chimed in to express their displeasure toward the strange happenings that had been taking place recently. However, Mag smiled broadly, and said, "You don't have to worry about this. At least Chaos City's food and beverage industry is showing signs of blossoming. It's not as rigid as it used to be. A bunch of old-fashioned restaurants are really old-fashioned and old-fashioned. Most industries develop quickly through imitation. I'm actually very happy to share some of my cooking methods and concepts with my peers." End of chapter. Chapter 2376. Meg had always been very tolerant of his peers' imitations. This was also a very important step for him to slowly change the Norland continent's food habits. Recently, the blacksmiths in Chaos City had suddenly increased orders for hemispherical iron pans. The frying pan started to become a type of cooking utensil that many chefs learned to use. It even became one of the choices of some housewives. Stir-frying went from a niche cooking method to a cooking method that was as common as stew. The publication of the recipe for eggplant with garlic sauce was a very important catalyst. Stir-frying, roasting, coleslaw, all kinds of cooking methods were gradually understood and loved by more and more people after Amy's catalyzed it. Of course, it definitely couldn't be said that Meg created all these cooking methods. But, he had the effect of promoting them. If the cooking methods of delicious food were only in the hands of a small number of people, then this world would be too boring. Allowing more people to learn more cooking methods, in different regions, they might collide and create surprising delicacies. If the people living by the sea only knew how to boil and steam seafood, wouldn't that be a waste of barbecue and hot pot? If the herdsmen on the grasslands only knew how to roast and stew cattle and sheep, wouldn't they miss out on the deliciousness of braised beef and dried beef? Meg hoped that if someone transmigrated from Earth to this world one day, they wouldn't choke to death on a mouthful of biscuits when they woke up. Instead, they would be amazed by how rich and unique the delicacies in this world were, and yet, they felt a little familiar. However, some things couldn't be tolerated. "Where's that shop called Rice-Selling Restaurant?" Meg asked Gina. Gina pointed, and said, "It's right in front. It's a rather big restaurant. I think it just opened 2 days ago. The renovation style is quite similar to our restaurant." "That's too much. They are trying to make use of the popularity. If something goes wrong, we will have to take the blame. We have to do something about it." The ladies were also a little indignant. "I will go and take a look tomorrow." Meg nodded with a smile. He also wanted to see who opened this fake restaurant. After the restaurant was cleaned up, the ladies bade farewell and went back to their dormitory, and had already gone upstairs to draw. On the other hand, little Guy and Amy were having a good time playing hide-and-seek. Not only were they sweating profusely, they weren't sleepy at all. The game of hide-and-seek was fun, but it was a bit useless. As the victim of this game, Ugly Duckling had been chasing the two brats for an entire night. Come on, Ugly Duckling, come and catch me." Little Guy ran behind a nearby pillar, and stuck her little head out as she made funny faces at Ugly Duckling. "I'm here. Come and catch me, Ugly Duckling." Amy had climbed onto the roof beam at some point, and was waving at Ugly Duckling. Ugly Duckling shook its head from side to side, not knowing who to chase. The most important thing was, neither of these two masters could catch up to them, nor could they afford to offend them. "All right, my little princesses, the game is over. It's time to go upstairs to take a bath and sleep." Meg walked over with a smile, and stroked Ugly Duckling's head. Then, he spread open his arms toward Amy, who was on the roof beam, and said, "Come on, Amy, jump down. Daddy will catch you." "Then I'll jump." Amy jumped down, and Meg caught her easily. He kissed her on the forehead, and put her on the ground. "I want a hug, too. I want to be lifted up high. I want a kiss, too." Little Guy ran out from behind the pillar, and jumped up to hug Meg's thigh as she climbed up. All right. Little Guy wants a kiss, a hug, and a lift up high too." Meg picked the little fellow up, raised her over his head, and tossed her up lightly. He caught her and tossed her up again. Little Guy's bell-like laughter reverberated in the dining room. "All right, it's time to go upstairs and sleep." Meg kissed Little Guy, and put her down as well. Ugly Duckling was exhausted as it lay on the ground, and looked at Meg gratefully. "Let's go. I'll bring you to take a bath." Gina walked up with a smile, and casually threw 2 colorful bubbles onto the 2 little fellows. They were like 2 air shields that enveloped the 2 little fellows. Then, they floated up and flew upstairs. "We're actually flying in the bubbles. This is so fun." The 2 little fellows floated away happily. Meg looked at Gina's back as she went upstairs, and couldn't help but feel a little emotional. She was clearly a young girl who liked to greet people with warm hugs a month ago. Why did she feel like an old mother now? After going upstairs to take a bath, and changing into a bathrobe, Meg came out of the bathroom. He saw the 2 little fellows, who had already changed into their pajamas, waiting at the door. "Why aren't you lying on the bed yet?" Meg asked with a smile. "We want to listen to Father's story before we go to sleep." Little Guy wants to hear Sun Wukong beat the white bone demon 3 times. The 2 little fellows looked at Meg expectantly. "I want to hear it too," and stuck her head out from behind the door, and looked at Meg expectantly as well. "You don't mind if I listen in, right?" Gina walked out slowly. "All right. Since you like to hear it so much, let's talk about the story of Sun Wukong beating up the white bone demon 3 times. Meg smiled as he rubbed the 2 little fellows' soft hair, and walked into the room. Ordinary fairy tales couldn't coax these little fellows anymore. Even Xiao Guai found those stories about princesses and princes too boring. Meg told them the journey to the west the day before yesterday on a whim. He didn't expect the 3 little fellows to enjoy it so much. Even Gina became a loyal listener. The charm of this monkey had already transcended the world and race. Speaking of which, the master and his disciples went all the way to the west and came to the White Tiger Ridge. Meg told them about Sun Wukong beating up the white bone demon 3 times. The 4 of them cheered for Sun Wukong's alertness and clapped for Tang Sanzang's stupidity. After the story was told, the 4 of them stared at each other. They didn't feel sleepy at all, and they were even more energetic. "Father, the master and his disciples left the White Tiger Ridge. What happened after that?" Amy asked. "What happened after that?" Please listen to tomorrow's breakdown. It's late now, and it's time to sleep. Otherwise, you'll be late for class tomorrow. Meg kept them in suspense with a smile. This story was too interesting, but it was also a problem. It was easy for children to be fascinated by it and not be able to sleep. Father, is Sun Wukong the elder sister or the elder brother? Xiao Guai asked curiously. Of course the elder brother, Meg said with a smile. You said she jumped out from a rock, so why can't she be the elder sister? Maybe her name is Sun Wukong? Xiao Guai asked seriously. This. Although Meg felt that Xiao Guai's words were a little ridiculous, he didn't know how to refute the little fellow's thoughts were so interesting. If Sun Wukong is the elder senior sister, then is she and Tang Sanzang a couple? So, even if Tang Sanzang tortured her thousands of times, her heart still didn't change? It seemed sweeter when chewed like that. And rested her chin on her hand and pondered, but if Sun Wukong is a man, wouldn't it be sweeter when chewed like that? Gina pondered. End of chapter. Chapter 2377. After coaxing the three curious babies to sleep, Meg heaved a sigh of relief. When he returned to the bedroom, he saw Irina lying on the bed, resting her chin on her hands, looking at him curiously. Why? You also want to know if Sun Wukong is a man or a woman? Meg asked with a smile. I'm just curious. Why didn't you tell me these stories in the past? And Sun Wukong, the mermaid, Snow White, where did you hear these stories from? Irina looked at Meg with a smile, and said, Actually, I've always been curious about what kind of life you've been living in the past 3 years. What kind of people and things did you encounter that made you like this? Becoming a stay-at-home dad is an unprecedented challenge for me. It requires more courage than any battle that I've experienced in the past. Meg sat down by the window, and stroked Irina's soft, long hair with his fingers. He smiled, and said, It may not require you to have powerful combat skills, but you need to have profound knowledge to deal with the questions that the children constantly ask. You need to have excellent culinary skills to satisfy the children's little cravings. You also need to master many tricks in life to deal with the various problems that the children bring. Irina sat up, and looked at Meg's face with a gentle gaze. A smile bloomed on her face, and then she opened her arms and hugged Meg tightly. When we were in the tree hole, I was always worried that you couldn't take care of yourself and Amy, but you did better than I expected. You're a good father. Meg hugged her with a smile, and said gently in her ear, I just did what I should do. I hope that I can make your lives more comfortable. Then, Irina smiled, and her voice became gentler. Can you tell me Journey to the West again? Meg's hand, which was groping down, suddenly froze. Rodu, backstage of the Black Cat Opera House. You've been here for a few days. How do you feel? Vicky asked Angela, who was sitting on a chair and staring curiously at the actors. Angela looked back at her and smiled sweetly. I think acting is quite fun, and it seems much simpler than I thought. This woman's every frown and every smile carried a bit of charm. It wasn't an exaggeration to say that she was naturally seductive. Even Vicky was stunned for a second. Simple? Vicky frowned. Are you saying that performing is a simple matter? The relaxed backstage gradually quieted down. All the opera actors looked at Angela with pity in their eyes. Angela nodded. From what I've seen so far, I don't think it's too difficult. Vicky crossed her arms and said with a straight face, All right, then show me how nervous you are. Angela stood up, and asked with a serious expression, There are many kinds of nervous performances. Which one do you want me to perform? Need to pee. There are no toilets or bushes around. There are only men, Vicky said coldly. Angela clamped her slender and round legs together, clenched her fists, and bent her body forward slightly. She bit her lower lip with her pearly white teeth, and looked around with her watery eyes. There was a hint of nervousness and shyness in her anxious expression. You don't say, it's quite accurate? All the senior actors present nodded in approval of Angela's performance. Vicky was stunned. She didn't expect Angela's series of actions and expressions to be so accurate. Also, the hint of shyness in her eyes was even more pitiful. It wasn't something that an ordinary actress could show. She was pressed against the wall by the man she likes, but she accidentally farted, Vicky continued coldly. All the actors present? Angela was also stunned. But soon, she raised her eyebrows, took 2 steps back and leaned against the wall. She lifted her chin slightly and quickly entered the role of being pressed against the wall. She folded her hands nervously in front of her, pursed her lips, and a hint of shyness and joy appeared in her charming eyes. She looked like a beautiful woman who had met the person of her dreams. She was 70% pure and 30% seductive. She acted out the role vividly. All the men present were stunned, as if they saw the shadow of their first love. Then, her expression suddenly froze, and she became visibly nervous. Her gaze became erratic, and her feet moved back a little. She was completely pressed against the wall, and her left hand gently pulled the hem of her skirt. Her slightly raised head also slowly lowered a little. She looked to the left, as if she was about to escape. Vicky's eyelids twitched. Although Angela's performance wasn't amazing, for a pure newbie who had never learned how to perform and had only stayed at the opera house for a few days, this performance was unbelievable. To put it another way, she was born to be in this line of work. The design of her actions was on point, and the micro-expressions on her face were just right. In the first half, her shy and expectant look was enough to tempt most men. In the second half, when she accidentally farted and wanted to run away, her embarrassed expression was just as adorable. When Meg introduced Angela to her, she had already guessed that Angela would be the female lead of the new movie. She was a little unconvinced at first, thinking that her acting skills would crush Angela's. But now, she was a little impressed by Meg's choice of actors. Although Angela wasn't a professional actress, she was very talented and had a strong learning ability. More importantly, she fit the role well. From her performance just now, Vicky had already found the shadow of the female lead in her novel. In this world, there was probably no other actress more suitable than Angela to play the female lead. Vicky looked at Angela with a gentler gaze. She nodded and said, "From tomorrow onwards, you will learn acting from me. Acting is an art. If you want to become an excellent actress, you still have a long way to go." "That's it?" Angela was a little surprised. "In terms of nervousness, I can act in many different ways. Wake up at 6 tomorrow morning. 3 hours before the performance in the morning is your time to learn. If your performance is satisfactory, I can give you a chance to go on stage," Vicky said calmly. "But don't expect too much. It's the kind that doesn't have any lines." "Then it's just a side character?" Angela asked. "Little girl, don't look down on side characters. We all started out as side characters," Old Me said with a chuckle. Angela shrugged and looked at Vicky. The corners of her mouth rose, and a smile appeared on her face. She said in a gentle voice, "My thirst for knowledge can't wait any longer. Captain, let's not wait until tomorrow morning. I'll go to your room to learn tonight. I believe that with your simple explanations and demonstrations, I'll definitely have the ability to go on stage tomorrow." End of chapter. Chapter 2378. Vicky glanced at Angela with a complicated expression. She said coldly and decisively, "Scram." Ever since Vicky found her peeking at her changing clothes outside the fitting room yesterday, Vicky had been on guard against her. Although she was 100% sure that Angela was a succubus, her gaze was too evil. She couldn't help but recall some rumors about succubi. For example, they were good at seduction, good at bed skills, and, in any case, it was very dangerous to let a succubus into your room at night, regardless of your gender. "Our regiment commander is really cold. How heartbreaking." Angela gently pressed her soft chest with a hurt expression on her face. The hot-blooded men felt sorry for her. They couldn't wait to pick her up and say, "Come, let's go to my room to heal. What are you looking at? Remove your makeup and go to bed. There's a performance tomorrow morning." Vicky glared at the crowd before casting a cold glance at Angela. "This demoness is messing with her team's morale. We have to find a way to control her. Otherwise, the opera troupe will turn upside down." The crowd immediately dispersed. Seeing this, Angela stuck out her tongue and prepared to slip away as well. "It's just the two of us left. Why are you in such a hurry to leave?" Before Angela reached the door, Vicky's voice sounded behind her. She stopped in her tracks. "Didn't you say that your thirst for knowledge couldn't wait? You wanted me to teach you in simple terms?" Vicky's voice carried a hint of teasing. Angela's stiff expression quickly recovered. She smiled and looked at Vicky. She said coquettishly, "I thought our leader would be so heartless as to not want to teach me." Her long, narrow, and seductive phoenix eyes glowed with blue light. Her every frown and smile was gentle and seductive. This succubus. So beautiful, Vicky had two thoughts in her mind at the same time. Calm down. This is the charm that succubi are best at. This succubus is born with charming eyes. Although she doesn't deliberately use charm, her every frown and smile can affect people's minds, including women's. Then why did you let her stay? I can also go to sleep now. I have to press her down today, or she will ride on my head in the future. So you like to be on top? Angela saw that Vicky's eyes were slightly dazed, and the corners of her lips curled up. Sure enough, even a woman couldn't resist her charms. She took another step forward and said with a smile, "Then how is the leader going to teach me? Do you want to do it here or somewhere more comfortable?" Vicky's eyes regained their clarity. She looked at Angela, who was leaning forward provocatively. She raised her right hand and hooked Angela's chin with her index finger. She pinched her chin with her thumb and said with a roguish smile, "Isn't this place more exciting?" It was Angela's turn to panic. What the hell? Wasn't she famous for being strict and fierce? Why are you suddenly so aggressive? No. We can't lose our momentum. She might be faking it. Angela forced herself to calm down, and her smile became even more charming. Her right hand was already on Vicky's shoulder and groping along her thin shoulder toward her neck. At the same time, her pupils began to rotate slowly as if a whirlpool had appeared. The eyes of enchantment had already been activated. She said seductively, "Then, how should we start?" Vicky's body stiffened as she felt Angela's soft hand moving up and down her shoulder. She didn't expect Angela to dare to climb up the pole. "I'm already having goosebumps. Hurry up and let go." "No, if I let go now, it'll be tantamount to admitting that I lost. I can't let that happen." Vicky gritted her teeth and grabbed Angela's hand that was about to touch her neck. She pulled Angela into her arms. Their eyes met. "Angela? Vicky?" It was suddenly quiet backstage. Vicky held Angela's soft waist with one hand, and when she looked down, she could see the big bear that was about to jump out of her collar. Then what? What should they do next? Vicky was a little confused. Angela lay in Vicky's arms and blinked. She was also a little confused. This was the first time she had been hugged like this. Although it was a beautiful girl, girls had their advantages. Their delicate body was easy to push down. No matter how rich her theoretical knowledge was, she felt that her brain wasn't enough at this moment. "Silence, silence, say, how long are you guys going to stay in this position? My arm feels very sore." A weak and powerless voice broke the awkward silence. As an excellent actress, Vicky accurately captured the confusion and panic in Angela's eyes. Her smile instantly became confident. She slowly bent down and gently blew into Angela's ear. "Your waist is not bad, and your breasts are quite big too." Angela's ears instantly turned red. Her legs went soft and she fell into Vicky's arms. "Oh no, I met a pervert." Angela's heart pounded. She wanted to break free, but her legs felt weak. Also, why do I feel a little excited? Why isn't she breaking free and running away? What should I do next? Vicky looked at Angela, who was lying motionlessly in her arms, and frowned. It was her turn to be in a dilemma. The verbal teasing was over. She had blown into Angela's ear. What should she do next? Should she really explain it in simple terms? But she really didn't know how to do it. Angela blinked and looked at Vicky. She wanted to run away, but she also wanted to know what she would do next. Would it be like what those sisters said? So nervous, so expectant, as time passed, Vicky slowly lowered her head and moved closer to Angela's face. "Run. Don't come over." The two were stubborn, kiss. Then they kissed. Angela widened her eyes and stared blankly for a while. It was as if her 6 meridians were suddenly opened up. She jumped out of Vicky's arms and dashed out of the door. After a while, her voice came from outside the door. "Leader, I'm not going to meet you tonight. I'll learn tomorrow morning." Vicky looked at the empty door and muttered to herself in a daze, "Oh no, I'm dirty. It's okay. I'll take responsibility for what I did. I'm the one who kissed her. It's none of your business." "But it's still my mouth. How did you feel just now?" "It's soft and bouncy, a bit like jelly." "Bah. I'm going to brush my teeth." You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.